Chapter 146. The A Student's Glasses. This is a pair of ordinary silver-rimmed glasses, but wearing it will make you look smarter. Well, it just looks like it. Let me tell you, this is a special flat mirror used to blind the opponent with Brainiac Flash. Brainiac's decayed tooth. It's this tooth. Sob, sob, sob. It almost killed me. Brainiac's false teeth. My false teeth are coated with poison. Don't make me bite you. Lick. Ah, it's poisonous. When you gather and equip the A Student's Glasses, A Student's decayed teeth, and A Student's fake teeth, you will obtain the special effect of disguising as A Student. Your ability to complain will increase by 30%. Your moral integrity will decrease by 30%, and your cuteness will increase by 30%. System: I didn't take any medicine today, but I still feel cute. Where should I start my rant? How did he become a slacker with 3 pieces of top student equipment? Or should he start with how to equip these 2 teeth? Those poisonous fangs should have died the moment they entered their mouths. Also, what kind of messed up ability was that? What was that cute power? Do I still need the ability to retort and moral integrity? My moral integrity has long since lost its limit. I gave up on treatment a long time ago. There's so much bad stuff that I can't even spit it out. Every time I saw these terrible prizes, it would arouse my desire to complain. At this moment, after a series of complaints, I looked at the interface in front of me while panting and staring at it. Kill you with my eyes. Kill you with my eyes. Fine, I know it sounds stupid, but for an existence that you can't touch but keeps tricking you, what else can you do besides kill with your eyes? Perhaps it was because he had expended too much energy during the reconstruction of his physical body, but the lottery system had become more and more unreliable recently. The items that he had drawn recently were all existences that made him speechless. The wordless heavenly tome contains the supreme heavenly Tao. All right, I don't know about the Book of Heaven, but this book really doesn't have a single word. How am I supposed to read it? Blah, 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 blah. Shamashin transforms into a wand. I ate a lot of medicine today. While singing On Behalf of the Moon punishes you with the dance moves and transforming, there will be additional bonuses to your strength. It's pink. All right, the rest need not be said. After drawing this non-mainstream magic wand, I immediately walked to the windowsill, opened the window, and threw it out. Who would say such a shameful line? Rest in peace. Holy Sword. Old Scoundrel Fu, Jin must die. The newest favorite of the one-hit kill, Must Die, Holy Sword series. It is the product of the resentment of the readers and editors. It has the special effect of one-hit kill against those who drag out their manuscripts and those who go out to collect materials. It will be especially interesting when used together with the one above. All right, aside from those strange and obvious pranks, the system did indeed give him some good stuff. Dongfeng Type 41 Strategic Nuclear Bomb. Don't say that the system doesn't give you good stuff. As long as you dare to use it and are able to use it, this thing will definitely be awesome. When I saw this thing, I was really scared. But when I looked at the manual that came with it, I knew that I had been tricked again. You want a special launcher? This could still be thought of a solution. What if the password was wrong and the system was locked? Where am I supposed to find the launch password? Could it be that they could only pry it open for research? But if it exploded, would you be able to provide insurance? Also, what does the magical fantasy world mean by giving me a nuclear bomb? Can you give me something more normal, like the incantation of a powerful forbidden spell? The system was really daring. The next time I tried, I got the powerful otherworld incantation. Dragon slaying slash, something darker than the dusk, something redder than blood, appear in the river of time. When that familiar incantation from my childhood appeared in front of me, my entire body trembled in excitement. Oh, a super forbidden spell that can borrow the power of an otherworld demon king just by chanting the incantation? A powerful forbidden spell that only requires a small amount of magic power to cause great destruction? That's great. Thus, I found a place where there was no one around and began my own experiment. I failed. There was a problem with the incantation? No, there was no fake product from the system. I succeeded. The incantation was truly effective. My connection with the Otherworld Demon King was also successfully activated. Welcome to the power of Otherworld Demon King summoning system. The Demon King you have called is not in the service area. The system is busy. Please try again later. Please try again later. Beep, beep, beep. Thank you for your support of this incantation system. All right. The Demon King was very busy. He wasn't in the service area. I could understand that this incantation system was a patent of a certain world. It was normal for me to be unable to connect. But what did the next reply mean? Please rate the quality of the service later. Are you satisfied or extremely satisfied? Of course, extremely satisfied is also fine. Facing such a user service of, "Dear user, I am your father. Use it if you like. What else could I do?" I cut off the connection and stared at the sky, speechlessly. Actually, this wasn't the worst of it. There was a year in the past when I consecutively drew a bunch of legendary rank treasures. Looking at the pile of orange legendary rank treasures, I was almost overjoyed. 1-star beads, 2-star beads, 7-star beads. After gathering all 7 Dragon Balls, can I really fulfill all my wishes? Back then, I wasn't scammed so badly. After drawing 6 7-star beads in a row and receiving the system's guarantee of the effectiveness of the 7-star beads, I was filled with anticipation to obtain the last Dragon Ball. I even started a plan on how to use that wish and how to obtain the greatest benefits. I even wrote a notebook full of plans. But it was a pity that after a year or so, I still didn't manage to draw the last Dragon Ball, even after drawing more than a dozen lottery chances. In the end, I could only let out a helpless roar. You're basically scamming me. This isn't the lottery for those ridiculous domestic online games, right? There's only lottery, but no prize. The karma involved in the 4-star Dragon Ball is too strong. I can arrange a challenge mission. As long as you defeat its guardian, it will be yours. I had read the national manga Dragon Ball back then. Then, the owner of the 4-star Dragon Ball, isn't it the main character of the manga, Sun Wukong? Challenge Sun Wukong? Thinking of those ridiculously strong people in the manga who could destroy planets and universes at the slightest provocation, I shivered. But then, I remembered that at the beginning, when the manga's plot was still normal, Dragon Ball had already appeared. Maybe I wasn't going to face such a ridiculously strong existence, and there was still a possibility of trying. Is it Goku at the beginning? It can't be the Super Saiyan that destroyed planets with a shockwave, right? Why aren't you replying? Could it be the even more ridiculous Super 3? Relax, it's not Super 3, it's Super 33, Super Saiyan 3-3. Don't fool me. I've also read that manga. How could there be a Super Saiyan 33 in that world? Cough. I already said that it's a parallel universe. That world's Dragon Ball was too popular, so the editor didn't allow it to finish, so it dragged on from Super 3 to Super 33. Sai, you don't even know what the power system was like at the end. In the beginning, it destroyed worlds and planets, and in the end, it directly destroyed galaxies and multiverse. In my opinion, let alone Super 33, as long as that universe isn't destroyed, it's even possible to surpass 333. All right, there's no need to say anything else. The first generation of Super Saiyan can instantly kill me. If there really is a 33, then wouldn't it be like punching the Nanshan nursing home and kicking the Beihai kindergarten? I didn't want to die so miserably, so I directly rejected the system's good intentions. Later, as time went on, the number of times I was tricked increased. I more or less figured out a pattern. It wasn't that the system wholeheartedly tricked me, but that its ability itself had a limit. Distorting the future meant that it had to bear the corresponding karma, and the law of how much I gave in return would still be obeyed. Thus, the beautiful dream of drawing an extremely powerful treasure with only a small amount of points was basically shattered. So for a relatively long period of time, I concentrated on drawing the godly arts and secrets option. Godly weapons, otherworld treasures, and the like weren't within the scope of my consideration. If I obtain power from otherworld knowledge and change the future, it'll be my own doing, and it'll have nothing to do with the system. The system only needs to bear a small portion of the karma. This is basically an obvious loophole that the system intentionally left behind. Who else would I choose if not you? That was why I obtained many things that made me speechless when I drew the godly arts and secrets, such as the wordless heavenly book, dragon slaying incantation, and so on. Also, the 90 manual, sunflower manual, cute trap manual, PS beauty creation manual, and so on were all real, but I had no idea what they were used for. Fine, let's forget about the above. At the very least, the research notes of the mages from another world were indeed good items, and I obtained many benefits from them. At the very least, they were far more useful than those completely unreliable otherworld treasures. As for why I had been using all my chances to draw the otherworld treasures, it was because I wanted to draw the spring of a drowned man as compensation for the unlucky Kolos. Unfortunately, even though I had obtained all the top students on the wheel, there was still no sign of me obtaining the spring of a drowned man. Forget it. I need to open treasure chests appropriately. Just because I'm ugly and unlucky, I shouldn't think that I'm the main character. This time, I should change my luck and draw something like the godly arts and secrets. This time, when I put in my fate points, the wheel came to a stop and I saw the secrets that jumped out. I couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. It was a hardcover game walkthrough. On the cover was a roaring Beastman army and countless Beastman heroes. Ding! Congratulations to the host for obtaining Quick Reputation Building Guide on the Beastman Highlands. Compilation of data on the top 100 tribes. System notification. Not only are there special troop types and basic military strength of each tribe, it also tells you the preferences of each tribe's tribe leader and hero. If you still can't win, bring your head to me. System. Can you not be so obvious when you cheat? But this time you did a good job. I like it. 32 likes. The so-called Prince Roland recommended by the Donglon Principality is fake. He isn't some awakened Prince Roland who has returned to Valkyrie. He is just a sign that Donglon is using to stabilize the hearts of the people. When I heard that the Sluir Kingdom had sent out a notice to the various countries and churches of the various gods, I wasn't surprised at all. This was completely within my expectations. However, I was still amused by it. Fummel Casso, since he was willing to send an assassin to kill me for the sake of power and position, then what does it matter if he lies and denies his ancestors? If the Sluir Kingdom denied my identity in order to stabilize its rightful position, it was still understandable. However, the next notice that he sent out was obviously courting death. Camo's tier fortress is peaceful. Our kingdom has just signed a peace treaty with the various Beastman tribes. The fake Roland spreading rumors of the Beastman invasion is the best evidence of his schemes. He is trying to sow discord between us and our Beastman friends. From a certain perspective, the Sluir Kingdom was indeed the successor of the Mist Kingdom. However, they denied the way the Mist Kingdom was established. Not only did they take the initiative to get closer to the various human kingdoms, they also used diplomatic methods to bribe and make peace with the neighboring Beastman tribes. I have to say, from a certain perspective, they were doing quite well. The reputation of the Sluir Kingdom in the human world was much better than that of the Donglon Principality and the Mist Kingdom. Considering that the Camo's tier fortress was indeed difficult to take down, the tribe leaders who received a large amount of wealth turned their attention to the other human kingdoms. The country had already had more than 20 years of peace, and there weren't many wars in its history. To the Beastman tribes, as long as they could open up a path back to their homeland, it didn't matter who they robbed. Anyway, it was different from the past Mist Kingdom. There was more than one human kingdom that bordered the Beastmen. Since the Sluir Kingdom used both the carrot and the stick, then they should find another pushover to bully. The other kingdom that bore the brunt of the pressure from the Beastmen, the Kisomi Dukedom, was quite resentful towards this method of shifting the disaster to the Beastmen. However, this was what they were doing, so they had no choice but to bear with it. Yes, the Kisomi Dukedom was originally a nail inserted to deal with the pressure from the Beastmen. After the fall of the Mist Kingdom, the true cruel war between the humans and the Beastmen was shouldered by the Kisomi Dukedom. The motive of the Beastmen's invasion to the south was very simple. In the short term, it was to hunt for resources. In the long term, or rather, there was only one goal: to take back the Bayanleo Plains, the birthplace of the Beastmen. The Bayanleo Plains was not the Beastmen's territory. It was the territory and granary of the human superpower, the San Antonio Empire. And the Kisomi Dukedom was a vassal state of the San Antonio Empire. It was said that the king of the Kisomi Dukedom was also a great noble of the San Antonio Empire. Even the strongest military forces of the country were original products of the San Antonio Empire. Every year, there would be many young generals showing their talents, and most of them were from San Antonio. There was also a small story about lifting a rock and dropping it on one's own feet. After a long period of time, when the Beastmen occupied the territory of the original Mist Kingdom, the Beastmen who had a high reproduction rate never gave up on the dream of returning to their birthplace. Large-scale invasions and small-scale invasions were very annoying. Many troubled countries finally began to miss the smelly and tough barbarian kingdom. 30 to 40 wolf riders may not be worth mentioning on the battlefield, but once they enter the hinterland of our plains, they can create countless bloodshed. Those crazily proliferating beastmen, like cockroaches, can't be completely killed. We need a barrier. And so, under the operation of several superpower empires, the Kisomi Dukedom was formed. The history of this country was not long, less than 200 years. After it was founded, it was like a nail nailed to the entrance of the beastmen into the human world. Large amounts of resources and talents were constantly sent from the hinterland of the humans, forcefully blocking the beastmen on the plateau. The Kisomi Dukedom and the Sluir Kingdom, the super fortress cities Hailu's Fortress and Kumo's Tier Fortress, after the fall of the Mist Kingdom, became the choke point for the human countries to guard the beastmen's invasion route. Relying on the unique geographical advantage of the fortress cities and the support of countless human countries, in these 200 years, they had defeated the beastmen countless times. Kumo's Tier Fortress was named after the place where the previous chief Kumo died in battle. But this time, the situation was a little different. Urgent report. War has broken out. The Beastman army ambushed Sluir, bypassing Kumo's Tier Fortress. For medium-sized cities were massacred. Sluir is an emergency. Chapter 147. In the eyes of most humans, the Orc Highlands was a barren land of magic. However, to the defending army of the Northern Lands, this statement was obviously far from the truth. In their eyes, the Orc Shaman and Witch Doctor were the most troublesome spellcasters. The former were adept at communicating with the elemental spirits, triggering various natural phenomena to launch powerful attacks, or providing support to their companions. Their magic consumption was low, and the effects were obvious. In some aspects, their attack power was not inferior to that of a mage. In terms of supportability, they were not inferior to a priest or a holy knight. Furthermore, as the shaman was adept at cooperating with their companions, they had a unique advantage in guiding strategic magic. That earthquake spell was basically the orcs' only ultimate weapon when attacking a city. But on the other hand, as a huge threat and did not have as many life-saving spells as a mage, if a shaman were to be caught by a strong melee combatant, we can give him 10 seconds to beg for the protection of Mother Earth, 5 seconds to pull out his weapon, 3 seconds to pointlessly resist or chant an incantation, and the last second to end him. Every minute, there are 14 shamans being killed. Please do not kill shamans recklessly, and support the shaman's Earth Drift spell, random teleportation, instantaneous casting act, and support the abolition of the shaman profession. Shaman Self-Help Foundation. Not mentioning the obvious weakness of individual combat power and the messy criticism. The shaman being able to be the first target in a battle proved that he had powerful support and long-range attack abilities. These just happened to be what the orc race, which was good at melee combat, lacked. If the shaman was the best combination for the orc warriors on the battlefield, then the witch doctor would be the strongest support profession. They were adept at concocting poisons and antidotes. They were adept at all kinds of curses and sorcery, but they were also adept at dispelling curses and healing the wounded. Although their treatment methods were somewhat ridiculous. After all, regardless of whether it was a cold or a headache, they were all treated with bloodletting, which was really horrifying. Although most of the medicinal ingredients that they concocted were unknown to them, most of them were dried lizard powder, pitch-black grass roots, and other unexplainable materials. But in the highlands where there was a lack of medicine, they had indeed saved many lives. The losers had already died. Naturally, the dead could not complain. Spellcasters were always scarce, and it was even more so in the orc tribes. For the beastmen, who were good at producing muscular warriors, it was difficult to find a beastman with a good mind, not to mention that they needed talent in casting spells. In every tribe, these two spellcasting professions were extremely rare and precious. Shamans, in which doctors had high statuses in the beastmen tribes, and there were many who held the position of chieftain. But now, the precious shamans in which doctors had become handymen, checking up and down the altar, and the angry onlookers even started to whip them. Damn it, we were already so careful. How could there still be a problem? Emont, Bloody Axe of the Blood Axe tribe, had a pale face. The sacrificial ceremony was hosted by his tribe, and most of the elite shamans in which doctors of the Blood Axe tribe had been involved in it, and countless sacrifices had been used. However, the result was still the same, which was really frustrating. Did he fail? No, that wasn't it either. At the very least, the orange-red brilliance around the warriors that brought warmth to the flames was proof of that. Did he succeed? Of course not. The tightened brows and troubled expressions of the various chieftains explained everything. At the very least, the results were far from what they had expected. My lord, the results are out. The blessing should be considered a success. It is indeed able to resist the cold, but even though the old shaman reported as such, no one relaxed because of it. That was because at the crucial moment of the ceremony, the glorious flames were suddenly interrupted, and the demon lord's angry rebuke echoed in everyone's ears. You actually dared to use such filthy sacrifices to obtain my blessing. You actually dared to place false souls on my altar? You are blaspheming and challenging my dignity. I curse you all. Curse you all for your imminent destruction. You actually dared to deceive the demon lord. Realizing that there was a problem with the sacrifices she had provided, the furious demon Marchioness immediately unleashed her wrath. The massive flames transformed into a giant flaming statue wielding an angry halberd, bringing destruction to the camp. The open demon gate further indicated that the demon army was about to arrive. Fortunately, the old shaman who presided over the ceremony cut off the connection with the demon abyss in time, allowing the demon Marchioness flame incarnation to return to the elements and shut down the dimensional door. Otherwise, it wouldn't just be a matter of the blessing failing. The entire camp might even be destroyed by the enraged demon Marchioness. To think that the ceremony didn't fail under such circumstances. The various chieftains revealed surprised expressions. The blessing didn't fail? Emont was even more surprised. He knew that Eliza wasn't easy to deal with, and he was already mentally prepared for failure. The effects of the blessing aren't complete. It can probably only resist the cold for a short period of time. Judging from the rate at which the elements are fading, I'm afraid that the blessing will fade in at most 30 days. Hearing that, all the chiefs breathed a sigh of relief. When the ceremony failed, everyone was prepared for the worst. Although the blessing that was expected to last for 3 months was reduced to less than a month, it was still much better than the worst-case scenario that they had originally expected. Have you investigated the matter regarding the sacrifices? Which tribe dared to cheat at such a crucial moment? I'm going to hang their chieftain's head on the flagpole as a sacrifice to the flag. Emont was furious. He almost missed such a rare opportunity and even offended a demon lord. There would be trouble in the future. Demon lords were famous for their service. It would be rare if they didn't look for trouble. If they wanted their help, other than serving them well, they would also have to pay an expensive appearance fee. The strongest currency in the lower plane was the souls that originated from the upper plane. In order to please the flame sea Marchioness, the sacrifices this time were the best slaves of the various tribes. The ceremony wouldn't fail for no reason. Demon lords were famous for being temperamental, but they disdained lying and deceiving. They would make a move if they didn't like someone. They would snatch whatever treasure they wanted. Since the demon lord was dissatisfied with the sacrifices, it was most likely that there was something wrong with the sacrifices. The old shaman of the turtle tribe was hesitant. However, when he saw the doubtful gazes of the chieftains, he knew that he had to say it. In the end, he could only grit his teeth and speak. The sacrifices have all been consumed, but the blessing wasn't complete. If it wasn't for the insufficient amount of souls in the sacrifices, we wouldn't be able to explain the partial loss of power. The sacrifices are gone, so there's no way to investigate. However, judging from the time when Lady Eliza started to get angry, it was the time when the sacrifices of the Blood Axe tribe were being sacrificed. Immediately, Embark, who was questioning the shaman furiously, became speechless. Something actually happened to his tribe? The surrounding chieftains looked at Embark with unfriendly gazes. They also remembered that the direction of the roar of the flame giant statue was coming from the encampment of the Blood Axe tribe. Yet, Embark said it so confidently. Wasn't this a typical case of a thief crying thief? Unknowingly, the seeds of discord had already been planted. The alliance between the tribes was mostly based on prestige, and the successive defeats were undoubtedly the greatest blow to Amon's prestige. In the eyes of those with ulterior motives, Amon was already beginning to lose his position as the great chieftain, which allowed him to command hundreds of people at his beck and call. For the time being, let's not talk about the seemingly peaceful chieftains. In fact, after the temporary interruption of the sacrifice, a certain will had already descended. The actual sacrifices had been embezzled and used for other purposes. At this time, the altar was already in chaos. In the midst of the sacrifices, a fiery red shadow was walking from illusion to reality. She smelled the cold air that was finally devoid of the smell of sulfur. A familiar smile appeared on her pretty face. Just like the incarnation of Lady Storm in the City of Rain, the silver-haired demoness had secretly descended into the mortal world in the form of an incarnation. "Master, did you miss me? Are you ready to welcome me?" I said I would launch a surprise attack. In an era where large-scale aerial battles were not yet possible, the most important factor in a land battle was the advantage of terrain. Kamo's Tier, rebuilt from the original site of the Mist Country's West Steel Fortress. This super fortress was surrounded by danger on both sides. The thick and heavy walls were actually covered with expensive magic alloys. The moat was filled with specially made unfreezing oil. As long as it was ignited, the sea of fire would burn for more than 2 months before the reserves of oil in the fortress's canals ran out. 1/3 of Sluweir's military strength was gathered in the city. More than 40% of the spellcasters were released. There were 9 large-scale mage towers and more than 30 medium-sized mage towers. The heavy cannons and fire ballistae on the wall near the Beastman's Gorge were so numerous that it would cause people to have trypophobia. After more than 200 years of painstaking construction, it had become one of the few fortified cities in the continent. As an impregnable fortress, it had firmly locked down the pass for several hundred years. It was said that its construction had even received the support of the various countries in the north and the human superpowers. Ever since it was built, the walls that even giants were unable to scale became a huge threat to the Beastmen Plateau. The Beastmen, who lacked siege equipment, were indeed helpless against it. It was simply a dream to think that they could take down a fortress of this scale with just a few flying tribes and aerial cavalry. Even the previous great chieftain of the Beastmen Alliance had died under the walls. But if I had to say, this was a wrong decision from the very start. Is there any fortress in this world that is impregnable? Even if you can defend against conventional troops, can you defend against the assassinations of top-notch experts and the bombardment of forbidden spells? Putting all your resources in one basket is a wrong decision. Even if your fortress is impregnable, I could just go around you. Even if there isn't a ready-made path, isn't it enough to just open up a new path? Back on Earth, the Magenta defense line had already proven just how foolish this immovable and fixed defense line was. But in this world, the military academies in the continent still viewed fortress defense as a classic and conventional battle tactic. Sluweir was also a practitioner and beneficiary of the fortress doctrine. And after this lesson, it was likely that all the military academies would treat this battle as an important case study. A case study on the foolishness of being overly superstitious about fortified fortresses. This time, the trade and exchange agreement that Slúir had just signed less than a month ago was instantly torn apart. The beastmen came without any warning and were abnormally fierce. The earth elemental god Omdarokin was much more low-key than his colleagues. He only used a local high-intensity earthquake to change the terrain, creating a long and narrow exit in the highlands. This caused a fortified fortress to become the eyes of the subterranean dwellers, a mere decoration. The Beastman army directly charged into the heart of the Slúir kingdom and then split into 4 groups to attack the various cities. The Blood Axe tribe led nearly half of their tribe to attack the capital of the Slúir kingdom, Entune. In order to create more chaos and restrain the armies of the various domain lords, more than 100 groups of wolf riders began to ambush them. In a situation where everyone was in danger, the various domain lords naturally gathered their troops to protect themselves. Less than a month after the start of the war, Entune was already in dire straits. Slúir's demise was faster than anyone expected, but at this moment, I felt rather helpless. It wasn't that I didn't want to do anything. It was just that the first snow after returning to the Donglan Principality had arrived. Even though I had expected it, it still came at the wrong time. At this moment, there were too many things that needed to be done. Without a doubt, it was the worst time for snow to fall. The winter in the northern lands was unusually fierce. The heavy snow outside the window had already covered the entire Defender. If one stepped on the snow would be half a meter deep. There weren't many pedestrians on the streets. Going out in this kind of weather was practically a disaster, not to mention marching. The horses would sink into the snow the moment they stepped out of the house. The rapid loss of temperature would cause precious war horses to die mysteriously. According to the unspoken rules that gradually formed in the northern lands, when a country was attacked by the beastmen or other foreign races, the other countries would provide some aid, be it material support or simply sending troops to aid. In the past, the country that enjoyed this kind of treatment was the Kisomi Dukedom. But this year, it was undoubtedly Slúir. But it was a pity that this heavy snow that affected most of the northern lands countries changed everything. The material couldn't be delivered, the reinforcements were stuck on the road, and the beastmen were attacking the cities in the snow. This was a situation that made people feel hopeless. The cruel natural environment was fair to the enemy. In previous years, the day when the snow sealed the mountains was also the day of truce. After all, to the warriors, dying on the battlefield was a long-cherished wish. To freeze to death on the battlefield was already a grievance. This kind of meaningless death always made people want to curse the family of the commander. But fortunately, as the fire god's blessing faded earlier, the beastmen were forced to start shrinking their territory. They used the cities that they had conquered as their base, slowing down the speed of their attack. In fact, even without Eliza's fire god's blessing, the war would have broken out much earlier. On the other hand, when Eliza's name was repeatedly scolded by the higher-ups of the beastmen, Almont and his Blood Axe tribe also suffered from the accumulated hatred and anger. While their reputation plummeted, they began to be marginalized by the main forces of the Allied forces. From a certain point of view, the Beastmen's Allied forces split into 4. This was a strategic consideration, but it also showed that Almont, who didn't have enough prestige to begin with, was unable to control the situation. At this moment, the other 3 tribe leaders all had tribes supporting them. Who would become the future Beastman King would depend on the results of this war. Everyone knew that the war couldn't wait until next spring. The human countries couldn't just watch as Entune fell and Slúir perished just like that. When the snow stopped, as long as the army could be mobilized, it would be the start of the war. As the war would start in the cold winter of the northern lands, and it was a war that involved the survival of the entire race, this war would definitely be exceptionally cruel. There would be many non-combat casualties. At this moment, I was also busy with military affairs. Has Hoyle's news arrived? How's the progress of the mine exploration? Every single Grey Dwarf was born to be a good miner. Their natural talents were the ability to move underground and their perception of gems. Hoyle, who was a grandmaster blacksmith among the Grey Dwarves, had an incomparable sensitivity to minerals. Regardless of whether it was foreign trade or domestic military use, the newly born Donglan's demand for minerals was endless, especially when many of the newly established armies were still using wooden training weapons to make up the numbers. A large number of military weapons would be the foundation of Donglan's rise, and the weapons had to start from the mines. This was basically the lifeline of Donglan's future. Even now, when the war had broken out, I still treated it as my top priority. When I returned to Definder in advance due to the war, I sent Hoyle and the other Grey Dwarf blacksmiths to the barbarians' territory to explore the mines. If even he couldn't find a mine, then there was no hope for the human miners. Good news! That mountain range is indeed a rich mine. We have already found 2 mines of fine iron, 1 mine of magic iron, and 2 mines of gems. However, if we want to mine them, it won't be a problem that can be solved in a short period of time. Lord Hoyle has requested for the help of heavy machinery and spellcasters. He even specifically requested for the BR brothers to help him. Blow up the mines? That seems to be the only method that will be effective in a short period of time. All right, send the BR brothers to help him, but tell him to be careful and not to get into conflict with the local barbarians. They're all stubborn, and offending them once is the same as offending them for life. Yes, Your Highness. We'll pass on your message. In that case, the next important task is regarding the new army's designation and flag. The various assistants went back and forth to search. The accumulated military affairs had already crushed their desks, and countless troubles appeared one after another. Even though I didn't have any intention of interfering with government affairs, just the military affairs alone were enough to give me a headache. Every time this happened, I would miss Eliza immensely. After all, everyone else could only play a supporting role, but Eliza, who I had raised up by myself, had the ability to deal with things that were in no way inferior to my own. She could easily toss all the troubles to her and slack off. All right then, Eliza was still in the chaos abyss, so there was no point in thinking about such things. Let's first focus on the troublesome matter before us. Antune's situation isn't good. It's likely that the city will fall at any moment. After all, they were all from the same origin. Even though he was filled with dissatisfaction and displeasure at the mention of that country in the past, upon seeing it fall, this young assistant felt uneasy. I nodded my head, indicating that I understood, but I fell into deep thought. Saving them was a must. Even though I was dissatisfied with their royalty, I couldn't bear to watch as the mist citizens of the same origin were slaughtered. Furthermore, if Sluer were to fall, the next one to be embroiled in the war would most likely be Donglan, and Donglan clearly wasn't prepared for an all-out war. Even though I had to save them, I had to pay attention to the method of doing so. I had to be of use in order to gain some face among the other countries and win the initiative in the future diplomacy of the northern lands. At the same time, I couldn't just swallow my own pride and shake the already limited resources of Donglan. After a long while, I finally came to a decision. Send a letter to Antune. As a neutral country, if Donglan wishes to participate in the war, we have to come up with a sufficient reason for them to take the initiative and publicly request for reinforcements. Right, we also have to submit an application to the churches of the gods. An application for us to send troops to help them defend against the invasion. Only then will Lord Wumians acknowledge the necessity and justice of this war, and only then will we send troops. Didn't you say that I was a fake not long ago? You accused Donglan of lying, and even announced it to all the kingdoms and churches. Let's see how you will slap your own face till it's swollen. Make the first part public so that the other countries can understand the new system of Donglan. As for the latter part, just throw it to that Fummel Casso, His Majesty the King. Since you want me to save your life, then lower your head and reflect on your actions. First, take back what you spat out. Swallow it all yourself. I wasn't worried at all that Fummel wouldn't lower his head. After all, Antune's current situation was already quite dire. In the face of life and death, many people would become much more honest. What an exquisite irony. Just a moment ago, they said that I was a fake, and now actually turn around and ask for reinforcements from a fake. In the end, the ones who would come to save me would most likely be the demon army that they were talking about. Thinking about it for a moment, under the current circumstances, the most suitable main force for reinforcements would still be my undead army that didn't fear the cold. In the previous announcement, those fellows directly referred to me as the demon army. They didn't even try to hide the helplessness and disdain in their words. We can't waste such a good opportunity for a winter hunt. We can use it to train our troops. Every night, bring along 2 retainers. Get those lads to prepare themselves. We'll set off once the snow stops. Chapter 148. Anwen Village was just a small village that was slightly famous for its delicacy, the silver-smoked fish. There were countless villages like this in Sluir. At this time, the snowflakes were slowly falling, and the originally peaceful village was no longer as peaceful as before. The fence that could only be used to block wild beasts could not stop the real beasts. Taking advantage of the midnight, the gray wolf riders entered the camp, and a feast of slaughter unfolded in the small village. The guards and night watchmen of the town were wiped out immediately. Under the surprise attack of the well-trained wolf riders, the militia that had at most challenged the ogres did not even have the chance to sound the alarm. At 2 in the morning, 30 wolf riders entered the village. At 2:15 in the morning, the militia captain, the village chief, and the local gentry were dragged out from their warm beds. Their headless bodies were fed to the wolves at the entrance of the village, and their heads were used to dig out the will of the resistors. At 2:40, the 500 people in the village were dragged to the small square at the entrance of the village. The women and children over the age of 1 were dragged to the side, and the massacre began. Perhaps none of the young men were spared. Some tried to resist, but in front of true professional warriors, the resistance of the commoners was meaningless, not to mention that the wolf riders were the elites of the strong orcs. After the highly efficient massacre, the wolf riders left at 3 in the morning. Before they left, they set a fire, and the bloody wolf feet left bloody footprints in the snow. The bloodied wolf riders were still silent, but there were only burning ruins and fire behind them. The heart-wrenching cries were nightmarish. Perhaps they were hesitant at the beginning, but this was already the 4th village they had destroyed in a week. From entering to leaving in less than an hour, this was already a highly efficient massacre. As for the guilt of the massacre, they were already numb. This was war. It was neither holy nor just. The only thing to consider was the path to victory. The mission of the wolf riders was to roam the hinterlands of the human kingdom, creating more chaos and panic, and dragging down the enemy's strength and energy. Although their methods were extremely vile, they had indeed succeeded. Beastmen were not beasts without a bottom line. Every powerful individual despised villains who slaughtered civilians from the bottom of their hearts. The people worshipped fearless knights who dared to charge at giant dragons, but they would never respect a butcher who slaughtered civilians for fun from the bottom of their hearts. Father, how many battle results did you get from the humans this time? How many human generals did you kill? No, I just slaughtered thousands of civilians. When he thought about how his child would ask him when he returned, he didn't know how to answer the question, even though Akari, the leader of the wolf riding team, was a famous warrior in the tribe. At this time, his sensitive sense of smell was still filled with the pungent smell of blood. Dreaming of the child's interrogation was his worst nightmare. He could feel the exhaustion in his heart. In the eyes of the beastmen, dying in battle against a strong enemy was a supreme glory. However, slaughtering the weak would inadvertently show that the strong was weak. Such a warrior would be despised in the tribe and would be rejected by the god of war after death. This is an order from our superiors. This is for our tribe's long-cherished wish to return to our homeland. This is for the greater good of our tribe. O justice, how many sins have been committed in your name? Behind a bright flag stands the criminal executioner. He also knew that he was deceiving himself, but at least with this excuse, he could ignore his conscience and continue the slaughter. The troops are getting quieter and quieter. Looks like I have to think of a way to boost their morale. Only the most shameless villains would flaunt their battle results of slaughtering civilians. Looking at the tightly knitted brows and stiff expressions of the cavalrymen, they probably hadn't reached that stage yet. However, they still did it without any hesitation. After all, this was war, An evil war, a beautiful war, a war that could cloak all sins with a holy coat. Wolf howls sounded in front of them. That was the report from the Eagle Tribe Beastmen Scouts. These 3 howls undoubtedly meant that there was an enemy blocking their way. However, the enemy wasn't strong and they could charge forward. Very quickly, they passed through the forest. The enemy was right in front of them. It was a golden-haired young man with snowflakes all over his head. He looked rather young, but the 2-handed greatsword in his hands was exceptionally eye-catching. Sai, another young man who chased after us alone. He's brave, but not astute. It's a pity he's about the same age as my beloved Kor. Looking at the young swordsman who was about the same age as his own child, a curly paused for a second. Then he swiped his thumb across his neck. That was in order to kill the enemy on sight. There are more youths around the same age as Kor in that village. Then, for the sake of Kor's bright future, you should accompany them. That's weird. Why does this sword look familiar? I think I've seen it there before. There's no need to think too much. Even though there was only one opponent, the Wolf Riders still got into their most proficient wave charging formation. The few Wolf Riders with the strongest mounts were in charge of melee combat. As the strongest, a Curly and the others prepared for a surprise attack. The nets and javelins behind them were already at the ready. Even the powerful Griffin Knight could be killed in an instant by the Wolf Riders. In the eyes of the Wolf Riders, this arrogant young man was already a dead man. Facing the fatal attack of the Wolf Riders, the young man suddenly smiled. His smile was filled with cruelty. This familiar smile made a Curly remember where he saw the sword before. Oh, isn't that the person on the statue in the small town who can release sword aura? It's the Sword Saint. That sword? Could it be the Roland's sacred sword? Saint Knight Roland? This was the last thought in a Curly's mind. The snow-white glow of the sword flickered in the snow. The flying sword aura started to claim lives. However, the Wolf Rider captain felt a chill on his neck. The view of the Wolf Rider captain tilted, sliding from the back of the Wolf Rider to the snowy ground. The last thing he saw was the silver-armored sword Saint waving his 2-handed sword, slaughtering his Wolf Riders one by one. At this moment, the Wolf Riders were completely defenseless. They were like powerless chicks that had encountered a butcher. It was no different from the evil deeds he had done in front of the statue half an hour ago. Those who kill will always be killed. How ironic. In just a single exchange, the Kara tribe warrior had lost his head. As a butcher, he no longer had to worry about how he would explain this to his children. A debt of blood must be paid with blood. Die. It was unknown who was the first to shout this sentence. Very quickly, everything returned to normal. However, there were a few more headless corpses on the ground. Yes, a debt of blood must be paid with blood. However, where did the debt start? Did it start from this war? Or the war from 20 years ago? Or the war from 300 years ago? Perhaps this was destined to be a messy debt that could never be settled. After killing the last Wolf Rider, I was also a little tired. Thus, I stabbed my sword into the snow and rested on the battlefield. While waiting for Irene Bela to clean up the fleeing Wolf Riders, I remembered some other things that I could do. I took out a sheepskin bag from the Wolf Rider's chest. As expected, other than supplies, there was also a map of the nearby villages. The red crosses on the map meant that the Wolf Riders had already been there, so there was no need for me to rush there. All I could see were corpses and blood. However, for some reason, I felt a little thirsty. Thus, I opened the water bag that the Wolf Rider left behind and gulped down a mouthful. Somehow, I spat out the sweet, low-quality horse milk wine. Pooey, bitter, and astringent, just like back then. While I was complaining, Heloise had already finished deciphering the route of the Wolf Rider squad. Thus, my next destination was confirmed. Blue Lake Village? I hope that I can rush to the front this time. I don't want to see such ruins ever again. Thinking back to the tragic state that I saw in Anwin Village, I quickened my movements and quickly tidied up the battlefield. After confirming that I didn't miss any information, I leaped onto Irene Bela's saddle and rushed to the next target. This was already the 12th Wolf Rider squad that I had eliminated in the past week. My comrades were all reporting their harvest. I, who was moving alone, had the least harvest. However, compared to the overall situation of the battlefield, my harvest was still a drop in the bucket. Everyone understood the logic of interdependence. Once Slough was finished, the ones who would suffer next would definitely be the northern kingdoms. Thus, the snow only weakened slightly before the armies and reinforcements from the northern kingdoms were already on their way. We were the fastest to arrive, but we also had the fewest people. 100 undead knight and 300 rookie knight probably wouldn't be of much use on the main battlefield, which had tens of thousands of troops. Considering the current situation in Donglan and the beast horde that they had to face in winter, the fact that they were able to send out troops was already shocking enough. Furthermore, the one leading the troops was me, which made all the unnecessary noise to shut up. At least in front of me. Of course, quantity was one thing and quality was another. My undead knight was reliable, and those rookies were the backbone of the newly established armies. The only thing they lacked was experience. As for me, I was indeed uninterested in the main battlefield in Antun. The reinforcements from the other countries were heading towards the main forces of the Beastmen, but I focused my attention on these scattered troops. The Beastmen strategy of splitting up their troops was already effective. The domain lords of the Slough kingdom were busy clearing out the rookies in their own territories. Naturally, they ignored the request for reinforcements from the capital. As for the domain lords who had some spare time, they were pinned down by the other 3 Beastmen armies. It wasn't a rare strategy for light cavalry, not just wolf cavalry, to hunt and pin down the enemy. However, when paired with the elite Beastmen troops, it was extremely effective on a tactical level and extremely cruel. For a normal village, it didn't matter if the attacker was a sword saint or a bronze rank wolf cavalry. Either way, the village would be annihilated. Chasing down these rookies was the typical example of a strenuous and unrewarding task. They were too mobile and elusive, making it difficult to catch up to them. Even if they caught up to them, with their superior individual combat strength, it was hard to tell who would win and who would lose. Before the main forces of the Beastmen were wiped out, the military strength of the various countries wouldn't have the spare time to care about the small villages of other countries. However, I intended to do so. Who cares about those nobles? Since we are here, if we can help, we might as well. My men were indeed few in number, but the individual strength of the undead knight wasn't weak. It was easy for them to face a small team of wolf cavalry alone, and the rookies could serve as their support to accumulate experience. Thus, I disbanded the battle group and allowed them to move freely in the form of one leading 3 teams to hunt down the small team of rookies. However, what was unexpected was that this kind of action brought about great support from the people. After all, the nobles and the royal family, who were supposed to be protecting the territory, were doing nothing, and my undead knight was the best symbol of their support. The previous King Roland has brought his army to save the people of Mist. That fake King Fummel, after ignoring the warning of His Majesty Roland, once again ignored the suffering of his people. He only cared about his own authority and safety, hiding in the capital. From a certain point of view, the previous announcement of the Slough royal family was continuously displaying the meaning of foolishness and courting death. I, who had let bygones be bygones, became more and more popular with my anti-hunting actions. The undead knight began to receive passionate support from the people, and they became even more motivated. What happened next was something that shocked and even inconceivable to everyone. Seeing this situation, even though Antun's war was still in a tight spot, Fummel warned me through the church not to take advantage of the situation to buy the people's hearts. He even announced that I wasn't the previous King Roland, and that I was just an impostor to deceive the people. Obviously, in the eyes of that His Majesty, the Beastman army was just an external threat that would be expelled sooner or later, and my knights and I were indeed ambitious schemers. At that moment, I almost turned around and left. However, after thinking about it, I was amused. Fine, since he said that I am buying the people's hearts, then I will really do so. Knights, take out our battle flags and military insignia. We are the legitimate reinforcements, so what is there to hide? Of course, from a certain perspective, I was very clear on the difference between the two. The citizens were the citizens, and the royal family was the royal family. But more importantly, there were some things that were difficult to stop once you stepped in. Was it really that because of that idiot Antoon, I would just watch as the villagers died? When this news spread, the reputation of the Sluier royal family plummeted. Every day, countless refugees chose to flee to Donlon, which they would never have chosen in the first place. It was said that when Fummel heard this news, he immediately smashed the century-old heirloom of the royal family, the rainbow jade wine cup. After that, he regretted it deeply and was very sad. After hearing this news, in order to console him, I even sent him a message through the church. Rainbow jade wine cup? Isn't that a byproduct of the glass I burned back then? Don't worry, don't be fooled by its appearance. In reality, it is just glass, so it isn't worth much. Actually, that isn't a wine cup either. It is just a small spittoon that failed to burn properly. It even contained crickets before. The back of that cup should have a secret inscription that Roland created. If it didn't shatter too much, you can try looking for it. All right, I heard that he really managed to put it back together, but this time it wasn't just a wine cup that was shattered. Chapter 149. If I want to become a knight, even if I'm a wild knight without a family emblem, even if I'll be someone else's squire for the rest of my life, even if I can't become an official knight, it's enough as long as I can become a knight. To Cohen Esta, becoming a true knight had always been his dream. However, it was a pity that he wasn't the son of some high official or noble. It was impossible for him to be sent to an ace knight as a knight squire since he was young, and he wasn't talented enough for his teacher to take him in as a disciple. He was just the son of an ordinary farmer. Forget about studying in a knight academy. He didn't even know how to read. He couldn't even reach the first step of his dream. Thus, he took a step back and set becoming an ordinary warrior as his goal. However, the result was even more disappointing. It doesn't matter what kind of close combat profession you are. If you don't have strength, you won't even be able to fulfill the basic requirements. You should go back. He couldn't even lift a sandbag for training, couldn't even use a wooden lance, and couldn't even swing a wooden sword. Naturally, no one was willing to accept him. He wasn't considered tall among his peers. Although his flamboyant blonde hair and delicate face made him popular among the younger generation, his frail limbs and poor stamina made him feel unconfident. The fact that even the militia was unwilling to accept him made young Cohen feel a little hopeless. But even so, he did not intend to give up. Since I don't have enough talent, I'll make up for it with hard work. Thus, Cohen's neighbors could see him waking up early in the morning and running around the river with sandbags. Every day, after he finished his farm work, he would go to the shops to help people move goods. Earning money was one thing, but he was also looking forward to using this method to train himself and increase his stamina. Although the training was tough, it was indeed effective. At least his pale and thin body had become tanned and muscular. In the words of his neighbor, Asha, he finally looked like a man. Unfortunately, in a sense, it was like a hamster had evolved into a squirrel. Its combat power had increased from 5 to 6, and it was no longer out of breath after running. However, it was still unable to lift heavy objects that it used to be unable to, let alone wield an iron sword for a long period of time. Therefore, even though he felt good about himself, he was still rejected at the first stage of joining the army. After all, Donlon was not rich at that time and could not afford to raise too many soldiers. Moreover, the people were very enthusiastic about joining the army to protect the country. As a result, the number of people who signed up far exceeded the actual number of people who signed up. Unknowingly, it raised the selection standards. A useless person like Cohen was too far from the passing line from the start and could never become a soldier. Even so, he was still unwilling to give up on the past. He just worked harder to polish himself, worked hard to accumulate, and hoped that there would finally be a day when there would be a qualitative change. However, it was a pity that he continued to fail. It's impossible for you to become a knight. Give up. No, I'm not talking about your birth. The Mist Country has always judged heroes based on their military contributions. Yesterday, it was a farmer's son, but today, it is not uncommon to see a knight lord. What I'm talking about is your strength. A warrior who can't even wield a two-handed sword properly. How can he enter the battlefield? If he can't even enter the battlefield, how can he become a knight? A knight who was moved by his hard work intended to take him in as a retainer. However, after conducting a test on him, he eventually gave up on the idea. Io, isn't this our future knight, Lord? Hee hee, nice to meet you, Lord. You have just returned from your patrol. Have you found anything? Did you challenge a demon or a beast man? Or did you just return victorious after defeating an evil dragon? Ah, the incredible Cohen, he is our Dragonslayer, the great hero, huh? While he was still doing his physical training in vain, while some people were praising him, those youngsters who found him an eyesore would also make use of the opportunity to mock him. Even so, he continued to persevere. At this point, he probably couldn't even remember why he chose this thorny path back then. Was it when he was attacked by wild beasts when he was young and was saved by the knight? Was it when he was touched by the deeds of his ancestors when he was young? Was it when he saw the triumphant return of the knight and cheered loudly? Or was it when he swore to use his own hands to protect his family and friends? He didn't have a path of retreat, nor did he intend to choose a path of retreat. He could only persevere. Believe in yourself. You can do it. I was also very thin when I was young, but now I'm as sturdy as before. Right, His Highness Roland seems to be planning to build a new army. Do you want to give it a try? Not everyone looked down on him. Every time Big Brother Clun returned and saw how hard Cohen was working, he would encourage him. Right, to Cohen and the people around him, Big Brother Clun was an incredible figure. He was the pride and hope of Doll Village. Even though he was young, he was already serving in the Royal Knight Order. Even though he wasn't an official knight, in the eyes of the villagers, it was only a matter of time before he became a true knight. It was just that he had recently adopted a young lady named Ailey. His days were tough, and he had mysteriously become the father of an unmarried child, causing many girls to be heartbroken. On the other hand, Big Brother Clun's encouragement made Cohen work even harder. However, it was a pity that all he faced was failure after failure. Until one day, he met a black cat, a strange black cat that could speak the human language. Only then did the situation take a turn for the better. Hey, I've picked up a treasure. It's actually an elemental sun. Make a contract with me and become a Magus girl. Magus boy. Cohen was taken aback, thinking that it was some Magus joke. In the end, with Big Brother Clun's confirmation, he found out that this black cat was an incredible figure. She was His Highness Roland's beloved pet, a black cat that knew magic. She actually said that he had outstanding talent in magic and wanted to teach him to become a Magus. Without a doubt, a Magus was an occupation with a better future than a knight. Logically speaking, he should have accepted it gladly. However, my lord, I'm very grateful for your love for me. However, my goal in life is to become a knight. Perhaps it's the path of a Magus. All right, back then, the black cat's face revealed an obvious, astonished expression. That expression was mixed with incomprehensible surprise, causing Cohen to worry that he had accidentally offended her. After a while, the black cat continued. All right, night it is then, night it is. I'll introduce someone to you and get him to teach you. From the point of view of a knight, he should be considered quite an impressive person. Although he is a wooden club as a mage, he might be a suitable teacher for you. Roland, I found your brother. When I heard those words, I was stunned. Isn't my brother Cavendish in the abyss? How did this darn cat meet him? You have great talent in swordsmanship. You are obviously a talented warrior, but you chose to become a mage. He is an elemental son, a natural-born great mage. Yet, he chose to become a Can Knight. Both of you are so awkward. If you aren't brothers, then what are you? All right, this darn cat's mouth doesn't accumulate any virtue. Naturally, I will teach her a lesson. However, I am confident in her judgment. Thus, I became more interested in the little boy named Cohen and arranged a meeting with him. Roland, Your Highness Roland, Lord Heloise said that you can make me a knight. This trembling lad in front of me was so excited that he accidentally bit his own tongue. Through the system's notification, my interest in him grew. Cohen Esta, job, none. Strength, 5. Agility, 7. Stamina, 7. Intelligence, 14. Will, 11. Charm, 10. Race talent, elemental sun system evaluation. With such terrible natural strength, he actually wants to become a knight. With such great talent for mages, he actually doesn't want to become a mage. He really is your brother. Race talent. Elemental Sun. Long incantations are difficult to remember, complicated spell formulas, and difficult to understand. These aren't problems for elemental suns. They use their instincts to control the elements and direct commands to replace inefficient incantations. They are the natural darlings of mages, the illegitimate children of magic and the elements, destined to become great mages. Very quickly, through our conversation, I almost understood what was going on. No wonder Heloise said that he was my brother. His strength is only 5, but he actually wants to become a melee fighter. His outstanding talent as a mage is viewed as a hindrance to his path as a knight. It is rare to see such an awkward personality. After interacting with him for a short while, I started to like this shy boy a little. After all, nowadays, more and more youngsters are aiming for money. There are fewer and fewer idiots who are obsessed with their ideals. There are even fewer who are diligent despite not receiving any rewards. From a certain standpoint, I'm also such an awkward, stubborn rock. Thus, I accepted him and made him my 3rd retainer knight. Cough. Since that is the case, let me teach you some of the necessary lessons for a knight. First is meditation and control of magic. This isn't a lesson for a knight, but a mage's homework. Young man, don't be impatient. Please be humble. Could it be that you have never heard of the arcane knight? This is a necessary lesson for an outstanding knight. It is impossible for a normal knight to learn this. Right? I have a melee fighter job that is suitable for you. Do you want to give it a try? Let's not talk about how I duped this young man in the future. At this moment, I am very satisfied with the decision I made. After all, with the other 2 knight squires not being up to standard, this young man has been a great help. Even if the direction of his help was a little unreliable. Brother Roland, I accidentally roasted the meat too much again. It is a little dark, but my intuition tells me that it will be delicious. Why don't you make do with it? Perhaps the new taste will be delicious. No, it definitely won't be delicious. One side is already charred, while the other side is raw meat. How should I eat it? Your intuition has never been reliable. Strange, I strictly followed the alchemy formula. 10 grams of salt, 1 gram of sugar. How can it taste so bad? I misread the decimal point. I gave 10 times more salt. I made a mistake with sugar and salt. Why don't you make do with it? Should I say, as expected of an alchemist, you actually brought a full set of alchemy equipment to camp outside? Making lunch actually made it taste like a chemistry experiment. But why is the final product so scary? What is that oily green thing? Can you make do with it? Before passing it to me, do you dare to try it yourself? I finally understand why you have always been a third-rate alchemist. Can't you get it right once in a while? Generally speaking, the retainers of an acolyte knight are the personal attendants of a knight. According to the tradition of a knight, the retainers are responsible for the logistics of their knight mentor. If the knight mentor isn't satisfied, no matter how strong the retainer of the knight is, it would be impossible for him to become an official knight. Before becoming an official knight, they are master and disciple, as well as master and servant. Many of them are even similar to father and son. However, the 2 retainers I chose previously are obviously unreliable. Most of the time, it is me, as their mentor, who takes care of them. Not to mention, the enthusiasm and confidence in their training are completely unseemly. Renee is a princess, so it is understandable that she doesn't have the ability to survive in the wilderness. Catherine is from a knight family, a fallen noble family, so it is understandable that she doesn't have the ability to do anything. If it wasn't for that brat Cohen who was able to make some decent meat soup, I wouldn't even know who was the retainer if I had to do it myself after traveling 1,000 miles. According to the plan grouping, my 3 retainers should have been in the same group as me. However, Renee said that she has already broken through gold rank and that she has the Roland's sacred sword in her hands. She is already capable of handling everything by herself and doesn't need my guidance. All right, it is impossible to grow without actual combat experience, so I will let you try it out. Since that is the case, I am afraid that you might not have enough manpower, so I will let the other 2 retainers follow you. Show me some results. However, one's rank doesn't represent one's actual combat strength. In actual combat, a bronze rank who puts his life on the line is enough to scare off a fake gold rank who has never seen blood. However, on the battlefield, a moment of hesitation might cost one's life. The result was completely within my expectations. If it wasn't for the Blood Tribe assassin I arranged in the dark intervening in time, the Princess of Donlon might have to consider switching to an undead job. Little lass, it's still too early for you to leave my tutelage. Thus, after we met up, with the help of the retainers, I became even more tired. Not only did I have to hunt the roaming cavalry, I also had to take care of the rookies. It could be said that I was a teacher and a parent at the same time. Fortunately, Cohen, who was born as a farmer, had a certain level of survival skills. He was able to help set up the temporary camp and take care of the daily necessities. Helpless, I even called out Renee's underground bodyguard, Susanna, to have her think of a way to teach these rookies the basic survival skills of the wilderness. At the very least, I should teach them the most basic cooking of roasted meat and meat soup. After all, if one were to live in the wilderness for a long period of time, just relying on dry rations isn't enough. Meat soup and roasted meat are the simplest dishes, but just relying on these two would lead to an imbalance in nutrition, which would ultimately affect their combat strength. Thus, for a mature adventurer group, the ability to survive in the wilderness is essential. The famous survival master Bear Grylls once said, "Surviving in the wilderness is my life." The wilderness is the most natural source of food. If I go there, I can eat anything. This time, when I just finished a hunt and returned to the camp, I smelled the familiar aroma of meat soup, which whetted my appetite. It smells so good. And there's also the smell of wild grass and spices. Susanna, well done. You all sure learned fast to be able to make it so quickly. Then, I couldn't continue the rest of my words. What entered my eyes was a young lady dressed in maid attire, busy at the camp. That was a familiar figure that shouldn't be here. Ding, Demacia, a passing wild maid has appeared. Thank the maid for saving you from the hell of unknown compounds. Otherwise, what awaits you today would be the mixture of Renee and Catherine's hard work. Green slime cuisine. As an insider, I ignored the system's cute act. The beautiful figure in front of me made me feel as though I was in a dream. The familiar bow, the familiar reflection of the lenses, the unfamiliar warmth and passion that was getting closer and closer. While I was stunned, the wild maid had already hugged me. Welcome back, Master. May I ask if you'd like to eat first, bathe first, or eat me first? All right, I don't know if I'll be able to eat you, but the dagger-like cold gaze behind my back really looks like it wants to eat me up. Eliza. Chapter 150. Big Brother Roland treats me really well. He often tells me bedtime stories at night, just the two of us. As expected of a little girl who hasn't even matured yet, you actually like to listen to fairy tales. But let this big sister teach you. All fairy tales are lies. Princesses are all useless flower vases. Princes are mostly perverts with different sexual orientations. Actually, there are many such examples around us. You are slandering me, but I can't blame you for being too naive. Children have the right to be innocent. When I was young, I also liked to listen to my master's stories. I probably listened to them for more than 100 years. Oh, I should call you darling now. Now that you mention it, it really makes me feel embarrassed. Eliza, who was covering her mouth and giggling, didn't look embarrassed at all. With just a few words, she managed to amuse the immature Renee, but it seemed like I was the innocent victim once again. Looks like Eliza must have met Cavendish. He is definitely a pervert. It is normal for her to have such an understanding. She definitely isn't talking about me. Shaking my head, I ignored the discussion and focused my attention on the feast in front of me. Due to many reasons, this seemed to be the first time I was eating food personally made by Eliza. In the past few days, after being the subject of many experiments, I had no choice but to take over the responsibility of cooking. However, I was already sick of eating my own food, and Cohen's culinary skills were very average. Recently, I had not been eating his food. As long as Elisa's cooking wasn't bad, I would be satisfied. It was a common broth. The meat slices were finely sliced, with bits of wild grass floating on top. The unknown spices increased the attractiveness of the broth, and the fragrance of chopped green onions greatly increased my appetite. Delicious. Even though I expected Eliza, who was good at housework, to have good cooking skills, the broth still gave me quite a surprise. It was fatty but not greasy in my mouth, and the fragrance assaulted my nostrils. After swallowing, my mouth was filled with a lingering fragrance, making me want to drink more. The barbecued meat on the side was covered with wild honey and spices, which also increased my appetite. What kind of spices are these? They must be very expensive and delicious. Thus, I immediately started chewing. On the other side, Catherine and Cohen looked at each other and started chewing as well. Judging from the way they wolfed down the food without a care for their image, I wasn't the only one who was tormented these past few days. Perhaps the most delicious food that I could remember was the last meal I had before I ascended to God Ascension. Unfortunately, due to time constraints, Eliza wasn't able to personally make it. This was a pleasant surprise. Hey, if you don't eat, we'll finish it all. I have no appetite. Renee was very strong-willed, but just as she said that, her slightly rumbling stomach made her blush on the spot. The most important thing in life is to be happy, and having a full stomach is the first priority. Roland, eat slowly. Don't choke. Are you hungry? If it's not enough, I'll cook a bowl of noodles for you. Thus, I nodded my head in delight. After regaining my physical body, I didn't have many hobbies other than being more and more gluttonous. As long as the culinary skills were outstanding, I wouldn't reject anything. So how could I possibly reject such a thing? But that afternoon, I knew that there were some things that I couldn't eat randomly, especially that beautiful smile of hers, which belonged to a demon filled with resentment. My stomach hurts and my head feels dizzy. This is the 4th time I'm having diarrhea in a day. Eliza, what did you put in the noodles? Cursed spice, black datura grass. Just as you said, this is an extremely expensive spice. What you ate just now is equivalent to gold. Right, there's also the little fang dragon meat that I just harvested. This is a great tonic. Io, Lord, could it be that you're too weak? That's not good. Let me cook another bowl of noodles for you. The datura grass that was used to make poison was actually used as chopped green onions. The little fang dragon was also known as the little green dragon, and it was also poisonous. Should I be glad that the two poisons intersected and it was only my stomach that was affected? No, that's not right. Why are they fine after eating it too? Actually, I've already processed the poison. It's probably because there's some catalyst in the noodles that caused the poison to erupt again. I'm so sorry, Master. The explanation and apology on the cold noodles were completely emotionless. Word by word, it was as if she was reading a script. Only now did I realize that actually, Eliza had been angry all this time. I'm sorry. It's all my fault. All right. A wise man submits to circumstances. I understood that this little brat's tendency to hold grudges and take revenge was extremely long. In order to have a delicious lunch to eat in the future, I apologized on the spot. Although I didn't know what I did wrong. Was it because I was too busy recently and didn't have time to contact her? It's all your fault. But since you've apologized, I'll accept it. Elisa finally revealed a sincere smile. Then she tossed me a small bottle. I immediately swallowed it, and my tummy finally felt better. Another reason why I was most satisfied with Eliza's personality was that even though she liked to throw tantrums, she would be forgiven as long as she apologized. If I accidentally angered her, apologizing first was definitely the right thing to do. I'm finally feeling better. I'm a living person now, so I'll really die. Don't make such a joke next time. Right? How did you come here? What's with this physical body? On the other hand, Elisa's arrival was a pleasant surprise. Soon, I understood the ins and outs of the matter. It turned out that Eliza's physical body was only an incarnation that had descended from the beastman's sacrifice. It was a sacrifice that had been embezzled. As a marquis, it was quite difficult for her to do this, as this incarnation didn't have much power. It was fine for her to do daily things, but it would be impossible for her to participate in battle. Enough, it's a good thing that you're here. This wasn't because my masochism was acting up and I liked to be messed with. It was because I had had enough of the pain of not having a capable assistant. Now that Eliza was here, I could finally go back to being a hands-off boss. The moment I said this, the cold Eliza smiled in satisfaction. She then moved closer to me and looked at me face to face. I can roughly guess what you're thinking, but I'm still quite happy to hear you say that. This is your reward. From a certain standpoint, the demonized Eliza was more willing to express herself and pursue her own feelings. Her youthful face came closer and closer. The frost on her face had already melted, and underneath the ice mountain was a fiery passion. Eliza's cheeks were flushed red, and her alluring red lips were giving off an astonishing amount of charm and heat. I was forced to the point where I had no way out. What are you doing? Unfortunately, I wasn't the only one here. Forget about the two of them who were trying their best to reduce their presence and pretend to be statues. Rain didn't intend to sit by and watch this happen. She rushed to the center and stopped everything from happening. Pity? I actually felt that it was a pity. Just as I was inexplicably conflicted over the change in my attitude, Eliza and Renee began arguing verbally again. I finally understand why Master hates naughty children who don't know what's good for them. You should pretend not to see your parents being intimate. Parents? Who's a parent? Also, I'm not a naughty child. I'm 14 years old. I could have gotten married long ago. 14 years old? How inconceivable. I thought that you were only 10. And seems to be only 10 years old, but she has already far surpassed you. All right. Even though she didn't say it clearly, but from the slight tilt of her gaze, it was clear that she had surpassed me in that aspect. Eliza, don't you feel heartache for saying that? All right. From the twisted corners of her lips and twitching eyes, the venomous, flat-chested young lady, it was currently clenching her teeth to kill 1,000 enemies while destroying 800 of her own. A certain weak spot on the young lady's body was probably bleeding. Just like in the past, with just a few words, Eliza completed her massacre, and the clumsy Renee could only hide in a corner to sulk. Suddenly, even though she was still teasing Renee, Eliza's words came from the ring. Master, I have investigated the origins of the bloodline of the New Mist Kingdom's royal family. I'm afraid that things are much more troublesome than expected. Using your words, this is a huge conspiracy, so huge that I can only be at ease if I tell you personally. The barrier has already been set up. Listen to me and don't overreact. The formless barrier blocked off all prying gazes. I continued to squat by the side, basking in the sun. Eliza had already started to clean up the dishes, but the connection between the two grew closer. Firstly, that is indeed the true Mist bloodline, but it isn't your descendant. You are still, as expected, a 10,000-year-old bachelor, a veteran of the FFF Guild, a forbidden incantation magister, and the spiritual teacher of the Torch Festival. Thinking about how I became the first love of a 10,000-year-old virgin, I felt a little agitated. Then, I instinctively felt a little disgusted and dangerous. It is said that if you hold it in for too long, you will become a pervert. If you hold it in for 30 years, you will be able to do anything. If it is 300 years, while I was being ridiculed by the venomous tongue, a shocking secret was coming at me from the other side. I couldn't care less about the venomous words and resentment. This time, even I was frightened into a daze. No wonder Elise didn't hesitate to send down an incarnation. This secret wouldn't be safe no matter how it was transmitted over. After a long while, when Elise finally finished speaking, even though the wind outside was still bone-chilling, cold sweat broke out all over my body. What if I didn't realize it? I was almost done for. Looks like my opponent really can't be underestimated. While feeling a lingering fear, I also laughed. Schemes and ambushes are only scary when they aren't discovered. Since I know about it, I can deal with it. Thank you, Eliza. It's great to have you. I owe you again. I really can't imagine what I would do without you. It's getting more and more mushy. If you really have the heart, you should stop messing around with girls. Even though she said so, from the sweet smile at the corner of her lips, she seemed to be enjoying it. While we were smiling at each other, even though we couldn't see the mental connection between us, the unscrupulous retainers behind us started discussing softly, suddenly opening his mouth and laughing lewdly. "Cohen, do you think that the poison in Master hasn't been cleansed? He looks a little love-struck and silly. I heard from the neighbor brother Cohen that men who hold it in for too long would become a little strange. Looks like Lord Eliza made His Highness lose his composure in happiness. As expected, one would become a pervert after holding it in for too long. But from the looks of it, it seems like Princess Renee has no chance of winning. That Senior Kathleen, Her Highness Renee, is behind you. She seems to be very angry. Your Highness, I'm sorry. That you won't cut off our remuneration because of this, will you? I'm still waiting to use it to purchase new alchemy tools. That, although the opponent is indeed strong, you still have a chance of winning. At least in some aspects, you're still on the same level." I really didn't think of some aspects. Anyway, I will try my best to put in a good word for you in front of Her Highness in the future. The acolytes seemed to be in some kind of dispute, and it was already a mess. I had to start thinking about serious matters. The revival of the mist? This is really a huge trap, a huge problem. Looks like I have to hurry up and end this war. Then, the next step is to head to Antune. Chapter 151. Your Highness, actually I have a new idea. Although the elemental sword seal is a discovery that transcends time, from a certain perspective, our usage of it is still too crude, and it is a waste of its development. We can start from the construction of the spell to make it more autonomous and automatic. After constructing the basic sword seal, we can use the basic sword seal to construct the resurrection sword seal. Every time Cohen gave me an opinion, I would sigh at the long list of terms that I couldn't comprehend. Just who was the teacher and who was the disciple? A genius mage who strives to become a knight, a rookie knight who trains in both alchemy and magic, Princess Renee of the Gentleman Alliance. My knight retainers are really a bunch of weirdos. From a certain perspective, these three couldn't be said to be outstanding talents, but they seem to be getting further and further away from the path of a knight. Especially the little Cohen in front of me. Without me realizing it, he had already proven his talents. Incantations? Spell formulae? There was no need to think at all. He could do it instinctively. To the elemental sun, magic was just a manifestation of his will. Regular spells were just a proof of a classic formula. Just like how mathematicians could easily derive new formulas, the elemental sun could casually create countless spells. I finally understood why Harlois wanted me to trick this little Cohen. The elemental sun of the humans, the son of thunder of the dwarves, and the son of moon of the elves were all seen as God-given children. The son of thunder was proficient in melee and smithing, while the son of moon was a genius in divine arts. They shared some similarities, which was that they were both amazing geniuses in certain areas. It would be a pity to waste such talents. My 4 elemental swordcasters walked the path of generalization and simplification. It skipped the accumulation of basic theories and allowed even ordinary warriors to grasp the ability to use the elements. As long as they become adept at using the elements, they would naturally be able to derive magic theories. The hardest step is still the first step. It's not that many don't have the aptitude to become strong, but they're limited by their talent and can't even take the first step. To Cohen, this was a whole new world. Yes, my arms lacked strength. Then, I would replace them with sword seals that could wield heavy objects. Yes, I couldn't run fast or jump far. Then, I would let the seal that represented the wind become my wings. Yes, my sword could not penetrate the hard scales of the dragon. Then, let the thunder summoned by the imprint become the sharp tip of my sword. The dream of becoming a knight gave Cohen endless motivation, while Heloise became his endless theoretical support. Every day, he would gain new insights and make new progress. In my eyes, this brat's level was rising at a strange speed. Yesterday, he was just a rank 15 for elemental swordcaster. Today, he had jumped to rank 17. Perhaps in 2 days, he would reach rank 20. His hard work had indeed enriched the new profession of the 4 elemental swordcasters. Black tortoise sword seal, entanglement of ice snake. Ice magic spread along the ground, invisible and invisible, but suddenly exploded under the opponent's feet, freezing the opponent's ankles. The most important thing is their characteristics: ice freeze, lightning paralyze, and fire burn. It would be too much of a waste to just use them as temporary enchantments to increase one's attack power. We can use their own characteristics to create various magic sword skills. You see, the spread of ice magic is too slow. Even if we were to attach it to the sword to freeze the opponent, it would take a long time. But in reality, it is invisible and very well hidden. We can completely sneak in. Alright, even though Cohen didn't create a new sword seal due to the limitations of his abilities, but just by changing the way he fought and releasing techniques that were suitable for the elemental effects, the overall fighting power of this new profession had increased by more than 30%. More importantly, he who could listen to the sounds of the elements had found the direction of improvement for this new profession. Perhaps other elemental sword skills would be released as well. Congratulations for mastering the new magic sword skill, Black Tortoise Sword Seal, Entanglement of Ice Snake. This skill will be included in the 4 Elemental Swordcaster system. System notification: a reward for inventing a new skill? You still have the cheek to ask me for a reward? How does it feel to be imparted a new skill by your own disciple? Can you still maintain your old face? How long do you think you can fool him if he continues to improve like this? The system didn't disappoint me and jumped out to tease me. Thus, for the dignity of my master, I could only put in more effort into my research. Needless to say, people are forced. When I created the Death Ice Sword Seal, which was a combination of the power of ice and the power of death, even Heloise had a whole new level of respect for me. The black snow that blew up had the dual magic of corrosion and freezing, which was extremely fatal to the living. The only flaw was that it seemed to have a high requirement for the user, which somehow became my own trademark. Of course, such a straightforward name, without any technical content, was definitely not my doing. They actually rejected the Sleeping Tortoise Sword Seal, which made me sulk for a period of time. The power of death is the Sword Seal of Sloth, and ice is the Black Tortoise. The combination of the two makes the Black Tortoise of Sloth. Sleeping Tortoise? This naming method is really too cool. For the sake of your future juniors, please go home and play by yourself. Hearing those words, but looking at the nods of the people around me, I could only swallow the bitter pill helplessly. Actually, I also thought of a name for your sword seal. Very quickly, Eliza, who had taken control of the team, also invented her own exclusive sword seal. The Destruction Sword Seal that combined the power of demons and Sea of Fire was extremely powerful and evil, but it was obvious that others were unable to use it. Let me guess. With your weird naming method and poor vocabulary, you would probably think of demons as wrath, and if fire is vermilion bird. Angry vermilion bird? No, angry bird. Also, your sword seal that combines ice and fire, Song of Ice and Fire. It's a pity that I still have a few names that I haven't used yet. If it's the combination of wind and earth, Azure Dragon and White Tiger, it could be called the Battle of Dragon and Tiger. If it's the combination of ice and wind, Black Tortoise and Azure Dragon, Romance of Dragon and Snake. I said proudly. Then, the surrounding disciples didn't say anything, nodding their heads and leaving, but no one asked me for a name again. Red Maple City, a small city in the Slúir Kingdom that wasn't famous, but to me, it was very meaningful. Back then, when I was dealing with the Beastman army in the north, this ancient city was also our temporary headquarters. If I remember correctly, there were still many traces of history left behind, and there was even an exhibition hall of the past wars. But now, this city had become the focus of attention of the countries in the far north. The reason? This city wasn't far from the capital of the Slúir Kingdom, Entune, and the area in front of it had long become the territory of the Beastmen. So naturally, this place became the gathering point for the reinforcements of the countries. I entered the city very early, and the city gates hadn't officially opened yet. I entered when the sky was still bright. At that time, the guards of the city wanted to stop me, but in a sense, in this land, my appearance was the best pass. When the guards saw me, they were stunned for a moment before bowing excitedly and opening the door. Open the door. His Highness is here. I nodded slightly in return. Stepping on the snow that hadn't frozen solid yet, the ground creaked. Looking at the beastman heads hanging on the city walls, I fell silent. I wasn't a kind person, and I lacked sentimentality and sensitivity. Along the way, I even became numb to such a sight. On the contrary, I actually felt a little happy and vented my anger when I saw this scene. The reason? It was probably because the villages that were conquered by the beastmen also had such a scene, except that the heads they hung belonged to humans. Based on the customs, the tower of human skulls, the naked corpses of young women, and the children who fell to their deaths made me even more silent. This was war, the kind of war I hated the most, because war was the ugliest thing in the world. It would legitimize all crimes and turn living people into living beasts. This was war, the kind of war I loved the most. In the past, I believed that only war could protect my people. Only war could destroy war. Along the way, I was called a hero, a demon king, and a butcher. Behind me was a sea of blood and mountains of corpses. Perhaps even the most infuriating beastman butcher didn't have as many lives as I did. Even in the era when I was called a hero, who knew how many lives were taken by my hands? I was once treated as a hero by humans, but according to what I knew, in the beastman kingdom, I was treated as a butcher and a demon king. I was often used to scare children away from crying. The reason? It was probably because I was the first to imitate the beastman's methods, using elite light cavalry and air cavalry to set up the tower of human skulls on the beastman plateau. This was a war between countries, and even more so, a war between the beastmen and humans. Both sides had accumulated hatred for each other for who knew how long. When everything exploded under a legal excuse, even the ugliest crime would become a holy and heroic one. I was a hero, a butcher, a demon king, probably all of the above. I never thought of myself as a saint, but before those bastards who kept creating new wars were punished, a bastard like me still had a need to continue living in this world. When the true villains were worshipped by the world, how could a little villain like me be willing to sleep alone? Sinners would eventually be judged. At the very least, I would drag them down to hell with me. Hurry up and leave. Bastard beastmen. The soldiers were kicking a group of beastmen away. But judging from their typical human attire, they were probably local residents and merchants who had been living here for a long time. From a certain standpoint, Sluweir's policy of peace and friendship was indeed effective. At the very least, the two countries have been trading with each other for several decades. While merchant caravans and merchant guilds were the norm, many residents and merchants of both countries lived in other countries. But it was obvious that the outbreak of this war was far too sudden. It was impossible for the expatriates of both countries to evacuate. Thus, they became the first refugees on both sides and became the punching bag for the expatriates to vent their hatred. It was likely that apart from the beastman invaders and spies, there were also quite a few ordinary citizens hanging on the walls. Are they spies? Or are they spies? After hesitating for a moment, since I met them, I still wanted to interfere. If they were soldiers, I wouldn't interfere, but massacring ordinary citizens was something I would never do, even in my craziest moments. You are Prince Roland. The young soldier called out my name in surprise, while the beastmen were paralyzed on the ground. Some of the children even started crying. Looks like even after such a long time, my reputation was still as resounding as ever. Since that was the case, the next step was simple. After finding out that these beastmen were expatriates who had been living here for several decades, and that they were being sent to the slave market to be auctioned, I spent some money to buy them. Of course, the children cried even louder. In their eyes, I was the worst buyer. Perhaps I was intending to buy them and use them to make meat soup or roast meat. Eliza, you're still as hypocritical as always, but I like this about you. I understand your wish is my command. I will set up a merchant guild here. I don't know if they will be able to survive, but at the very least, it is better than being sold as slaves. If they were to become slaves at this time, even the children would become the military medals of those nobles. I nodded my head without saying anything. In this aspect, Eliza was much stronger than me. If she couldn't do it well, I wouldn't be able to do it well either. Hypocrite? There really wasn't any room for me to refute. I knew that I was a hypocrite because even though I had just willfully saved a few Beastman civilians, I had to consider how to take the lives of even more Beastmen now. Where's the Alliance Command? Where are the nobles of the various countries? Why haven't they started the war yet? Are they intending to watch as Antun falls? Chapter 152. As we all know, the Orc army is marching with all their might. There are more than 270 known tribes. Although they claim to have 800,000 soldiers, they only have about 200,000 in total. After deducting at least 30,000 non-combatants, they only have about 180,000 soldiers. However, they've already split into 4 groups. They've undoubtedly committed a military taboo. Maple City's old opera house with more than 600 years of history had long been abandoned, but now it was rejuvenated and turned into a temporary conference hall. On the stage, the handsome middle-aged man in military uniform was drooling, but the audience below were clearly not buying it. Some were napping, some were reading, and some were chatting. Even if we consider that the Orc warriors are indeed stronger than us, our allied army has more than 300,000 soldiers. We still have the advantage in terms of military strength. We can take advantage of the fact that they're splitting up to encircle and kill their tribes. Behrman Lund is a strong contender for the Orc Emperor. He has at least 20 tribes under his command, with a total military strength of about 55,000. There are many different types of troops, ranging from the weak rat men to the strong bear men and elephant men. What's worth mentioning is that the main force of the Orc tribe is hibernating. Their marching speed is the slowest. Recently, they've even begun to collect rations and winter supplies. They seem to be planning to defend their current territory for the winter. Kar Centaur Hamar has 30,000 troops. They're mainly composed of high-speed cavalry and fast-moving orcs. They have the least military strength, but because they don't have a base, they're fighting guerrillas everywhere. In reality, they're the most troublesome. They're attacking the eastern defense line and seem to want to enter the other countries. If they really charge into the south, I'm afraid we'll be in big trouble. Wolf King Sastero has 40,000 troops. They're mainly composed of lion men, tiger men, werewolves, and other powerful tribes. But I don't know what he's thinking. He actually turned back to attack the western border. Are they planning to attack the Elven Kingdom? But it said that his strategist is the Fox tribe's great sage, Wen. He should have his own plans. Eagleman Amont has 60,000 troops. They're very mixed, but there are many aerial cavalry and flying orcs. From past reports, he's also the initiator of this orc allied army. It is said that they have the most experts. They are currently attacking Antun, and Antun has suffered great losses. I'm afraid they won't be able to hold on for long. There were circles and crosses on the diagram, and the current positions of the various troops and their main direction of attack were very clear. However, even though the soldier was trying very hard to explain, the discussions below only grew louder. We have the upper hand in terms of military strength. Over 300,000? Are you kidding me? We'll only have 200,000 at most if we take out all the ordinary beastmen. Our total combat power is only about a third of the beastmen's. How are we supposed to fight this battle? Antun is almost 100,000 soldiers defending it, but it's surrounded by Amont's 60,000 soldiers. It's asking for reinforcements every day, and it looks like it's about to fall. Perhaps the 1-to-3 combat strength ratio will have to be revised. Have you heard? A behemoth has appeared on the Bearman's side. It flattened the walls of Winder City in 2 strikes. This is the 10th city that he has conquered. Now, I can only hope that they will really hibernate. I don't want to face these big guys. That's good. But I heard that the situation this time is a little strange. Not only are the beastmen not afraid of the cold, but they can also migrate to fight in the snowy weather. That's why they can launch a surprise attack in winter. On the battlefield, our people are shivering from the cold. There's an obvious gap in individual strength, and we can't match them. Now that we're fighting a decisive battle, are we in a hurry to die? Yes, this time the beastmen came too quickly. Now that they have conquered so many cities, I'm afraid we don't have to worry about logistics anymore. Also, we didn't bring along the siege vehicles and other large machines, and the logistics are also intermittent. How are we supposed to fight this battle? Are we supposed to fight with the beastmen on an empty stomach in this world of ice and snow? Shouldn't these troublesome things be handled by the super empires? Why do we have to deal with a few small countries in the north? What did the kingdom of Kisomi say? Does the empire of San Antonio have any objections? If the beastmen were a few big shots who wanted to be the boss, then the humans were like a plate of loose sand. They all wanted to preserve their strength and let others be the cannon fodder. The beastmen came too suddenly. The first city that fell gave them supplies and a base. On the contrary, the reinforcements from a human side who rushed over after the snow were more like a guest army. The Orizon Mountains area of the Orizon Mountains turned out in full force. Although the number of beastmen was nothing in front of the super empires, they were all elites of the beastmen. And the 6 northern countries could not send out all their forces for a neighboring country. The 5 countries only sent out a total of about 200,000 soldiers, an average of 50,000 for each country. This was also the reason why the decisive battle was delayed. The humans were waiting for more reinforcements, while the beastmen had just stabilized their footing. They each had their own strategic goals, so they went their own ways. And Amon's current goal was to defeat Antoon and solidify his position among the beastmen. The strategic goals of the humans and the beastmen did not conflict, so naturally the decisive battle was delayed. And many generals in the north hoped that the battle could be delayed until next spring, when their countries had finished preparing for war and had an obvious advantage in military strength. As for the Antoon, who was still waiting for reinforcements, Sluwer's country was about to be destroyed. Who would care about his opinion? Of course, it was also impossible to confirm the fall of Antoon. Weren't they discussing it now? Finally, the general was still singing that no one really believed in the theory of unity and victory. It was a waste of precious time. Someone could not stand it anymore. Enough. We are soldiers, not politicians who are bored enough to fight with their colleagues after drinking and drinking all day long. It was a middle-aged man with a dark face. His face was wrinkled, and he was not tall. His long snow fox fur cloak dragged on the ground. But when he roared, the noisy hall quieted down. The mission of rescuing Antoon will be undertaken by us, the kingdom of Kisomi alone. His tones sounded calm, but it was like thunder that shook the entire hall. Now, what the countries were avoiding was the risk of going against Amont's main force. The moment this dark-faced general appeared, he actually took on the most important mission. Look at the time, and you're still dragging your feet. We have reinforcements, but the orcs don't. There are at least thousands of orc tribes in the Orizon Mountains. Not every chief will give face to Amont and respond to the call of the allied forces. There are also some tribes that have a good relationship with us. But do you think that when those tribes feel that the humans are weak and easy to bully, and that the day of their counterattack is just around the corner, they will still not make a move? Sluwer must be saved. Otherwise, if this precedent is set, the next time your country is invaded by other tribes, I am afraid that no one will save you. Take a step back. If the Sluwer kingdom is really destroyed, the orcs will directly border your country. Do you have a fortress like Kamo's tier? At that time, the orcs' wolf riders will hunt on your plains, kill your civilians, burn your farms, and kidnap your children and women. Is this what you want? The general of the kingdom of Kisomi's voice became louder and louder. In the end, he was roaring angrily. All right, if you want to cower, then cower. When the time comes and you're on the center list, please don't drag me down with you. Einro, I'm not a coward. I will bear the burden of saving Antoon. If you're still a soldier, no, if you're still a man, then hold back the other orcs for me. Restrain the other beastmen for me. Don't let them stop our decisive battle. Hearing this, the sleepy me finally became a little more awake. After listening to nonsense for the past 3 days, there was finally some substantive content. Who is he? He was assigned a mission while roaring. He is considered not bad among a bunch of trash. Don't these people think that the sky is the greatest and they're the second in command? Why are they so obedient? Is this black-faced guy famous? Of course, he is different from a nameless guy who was fooled for 3 days. He is a big shot on the list of meritorious generals. He can't be considered as a general of the kingdom of Kisomi. He was just transferred here. However, Black Bear Einro is quite famous even in his own country, San Antonio. Amelia came here earlier than me. Since she didn't want to chase after the Rangers, she directly moved into Red Maple City. Indirectly, she became the temporary leader of Donglan here. However, she seemed to be in a bad mood from the moment we met, and her words were full of sarcasm. Meritorious General List? What's that? And the center list that he mentioned? Looks like I'm really an antique who can't keep up with the times. This thing existed in our era too. It's just that you didn't pay attention to it. You would probably know if I changed its name. The Fairies' Multidimensional Notebook. Oh, so it's something made by those fairies. They are as free as ever. Fairies were a natural magic race. Just by looking at their appearance, they looked similar to delicate elves. However, the tallest one of them was probably only a dozen centimeters tall. They could even dance on the palm of a human. There were many different types of fairies. There were winged fairies that grew wings. There were shadowy fairies that were adept at living in the shadows. There were many differences in personality, living habits, and living environment. However, if one were to find a common characteristic, it would probably be that they were extremely talkative and loved to gossip. Their people were spread all over the continent. As a naturally neutral race, the fairies had a good relationship with all other races. They had their own merchant associations and workshops in various places. In human countries, fairy refinement was a real golden signboard. At the same time, their merchant associations were the best information brokers. As long as one could pay the price, there was no secret that couldn't be bought from the hands of the fairies. The fairy notebook that Heloise mentioned was created by the fairies. Some of the major events and important figures in history were recorded by the fairies. The Meritorious General List is a sub-list made by the fairies. It is the current famous generals of the continent. It is said that they are assigned according to their achievements and positions. This is obviously disadvantageous to small countries, so there's a lot of exaggeration. However, this list also has a mother list, the Historical Generals List, also known as the God of War list. This is a ranking of all the famous generals in history. This is very convincing. Those who can be ranked in the top 100 when they were alive are basically the national treasures of each country. Historical figures? Ancient famous generals? Hearing this, I felt like I had some unnecessary thoughts. You died too early when you were a human. You probably didn't even have the chance to be on the Meritorious General List. However, in reality, you have always been on an even more famous list, and your ranking is quite high. Hearing this, I couldn't help but be pleasantly surprised. This was a list that was even more famous than the famous generals in history. Could it be that I was also a famous person in history? Wasn't the purpose of a person's life to leave behind their own traces? Could it be that I had somehow left behind a thick stroke in history? This was such a pleasant surprise. What list? The 99 Calamity Rankings. You are ranked 33rd, the Undying Roland. My expression immediately darkened. I knew about this list. Those who were on it were all super troublesome. They were known as moving calamities, walking plagues. They would bring disaster wherever they went. When this disaster was dangerous enough and no one was able to stop them, then they would be on this list. This is a natural disaster. Humans are unable to resist it. If you see it, then run. If you really meet it, then you can only blame it on your misfortune. This list was called the Calamity Rankings. I have another identity. Since even Roland was on the list, then Emperor Yongye's identity should be on the list as well. No, I wasn't on the list from the start. From the looks of it now, the Pixies probably merged the two identities together. Anyway, they never explained themselves. If you want further information, then the price is really high. Fisk, I've been seen through. Isn't it normal to be seen through? Did you hide it? Using the Miss War flag as the Royal Guard's war flag, do you really think that others are fools? I nodded. I indeed didn't hide it. Since I decided to take revenge back then, I should at least let my opponent know why I killed him. Now that I thought about it, it was only natural that the Pixies, who had so many eyes and ears, saw through my disguise. I just didn't know how much money they had earned by using my information over the years. Actually, there are quite a few familiar faces on the list. The new one on the list is a red dragon named Molly. She's causing destruction everywhere. You should know her, right? There's also the demon professor, Heloise, ranked 46th. From this name, it can be seen that she doesn't have much destructive power. The main reason why she's ranked is because she has taught quite a few good students. For example, you. What's your rank? I exclaimed that the former Dragon Queen Molly was indeed tenacious. She couldn't survive in the underground, so she ran to the surface to stir up trouble. I asked with a face full of certainty. Since Heloise and I were on the list, Amelia in front of me shouldn't be able to escape. The last time I checked, it was 57th, the super willful Witch of the Storm mood. I was originally ranked 69th, but 3 of my friends who were ahead of me died. One of them was killed by me, so I jumped again and rose 12 ranks in a row. A certain someone said gleefully, but she did have a reason to be gleeful. That's great. This title sounds much better than mine. What do you mean by indestructible? It doesn't sound impressive at all. Can I request to change my title? You think my title sounds good too? Hee hee. You know what's good for you. Others actually said that it doesn't match with me. How infuriating. But no matter how nice your words sound, I won't give this title to you. Damn it, you actually found out. Then, can you contact Vixen? This title sounds so bad. You should at least change it to something more impressive. For example, the peerless, naturally intelligent, and forever loved by everyone's Roland. The super stupid, super selfish, super unpopular Roland? Leave it to me. I'll contact the Vixen. Since the Vixen likes to pursue the truth, this title should be acceptable. We were helpless against our daily bickering. Rain and the others on the side had helpless expressions on their faces. What the heck was going on? The general above was spitting saliva everywhere as he announced his strategic decision. These two were way too out of the loop. However, I knew that I already knew what I needed to know over the past 3 days. If I continued watching like this, I would really become cannon fodder that would listen to others' commands. And so I stood up. Einro, your plans are basically suicidal. I have some new suggestions and secret information here. Perhaps it's time to listen to my opinion. Chapter 153. This black general's name was Einluo. His head was like a black tiger. His face was like a millstone, his body was like an iron tower, and he had a pair of big eyes like copper bells. He had a flat nose and wide ears, and he breathed like a bull. His tiger-like eyes were filled with power, and he was extremely domineering. He had spent his entire life in the army, and he was ranked 91st on the list of meritorious generals. He was a famous vanguard general, and he never gave up in a bloody battle. He was once hit by 18 arrows, but he did not fall. He risked his life to capture the city gate, and he was known as Little Blackie. Standing in front of him was a rather young, white-faced general. He looked like he was about 17 or 18 years old, but in the eyes of the veterans in the army, he was still a child. He held a mithril holy sword, a golden tiger-winged helmet, and a silver chainmail inlaid with jade. On his feet were thick boots made of dragon skin. His face was full of peach blossoms, and he wore luxurious clothes and a sword. He was really good-looking, but if you looked closely, you would notice that he was less majestic. His face was more feminine, white like jade, pink skin, red lips, and a smile on his lips. He looked more like a prostitute than a general. If you looked down on him because of his appearance, you would be making a big mistake. The silver sword in his hand was the famous Pale Justice, and it had cut down evil dragons and liches. Think about it. The sword chooses its master. Can an ordinary person hold this sword? Can this person be an ordinary person? The silver armored general's full name was Roland. He was not even 16 years old, but he had already spent half of his life on the battlefield. He was a famous young general, and people called him the Silver Dragon. Don't be fooled by his young face. He could go out of the palace hall and into the kitchen. His silver sword was stained with the blood of villains, and his illustrious achievements shocked the whole of HE. Even that pair of dragon skin boots was taken from the super evil 9-headed dragon that hunted in the wilderness. How could such a person be simple? These two generals were famous for their bad tempers, and they were even more famous for being stubborn and not listening to advice. Now that the two of them had different opinions about the war, They naturally drew their weapons and fought each other. It could be said that they were really at each other's throats. The feng shui of the black and white generals were originally at odds with each other, and their grievances were deep. With the eruption, it was like a black tiger fighting a white dragon. It was a battle between a dragon and a tiger. In the main hall, at the center of the stage, the two of them glared at each other. The black-faced one felt that the white-faced one's face was too tender and unreliable, while the white-faced one felt that the black-faced one was too ugly and frightening. For a moment, a murderous aura and a domineering aura filled the air. Finally, the two of them walked closer and closer until they were face to face, eye to eye, and then their lips collided. Yes, they actually clashed together because they appreciated each other's talent. This is the victory of the Great Spirit. This was the final victory of the Fujoshi. At that moment, Roland felt that he had inherited the glorious tradition of all philosophers. Abu Gauha, a famous gay man, and Billy King, an even more famous gay man, had their souls possessed at this moment. Roland represents the long history and tradition of heterosexuality in Aichi. At this moment, he is not fighting alone. He is not alone. Eliza, it's one thing for you to read books in my ear, but now you're talking about all this nonsense. I'm going to send you back to the abyss immediately. I mean what I say. I roared angrily in my heart. The next moment, Eliza, who was intentionally making up stories and then suddenly being possessed by a certain narrator, finally shut up. Yep, those were all stories that Eliza made up on the spot. They were definitely not true. I was never a gay man, definitely not. Now that my ear had quieted down, I was also in the mood to consider the opponent before me. Black Bear Einro, Suan from San Antonio. 44 years old, Earl of Military Merit. 27 years in the Army. He rose step by step from an ordinary knight to a general. He often takes the lead and leads the charge. His most famous battle achievement is that he led the army to traverse several hundred kilometers of mountain roads in a single night, breaking through the encirclement set up by the neighboring country and counterattacking the enemy's 4 cities. Comments on the famous general's ranking: an experienced veteran general. His tactics are experienced and orthodox. He doesn't like to use surprise attacks. He doesn't have any particularly brilliant strategies, but he also doesn't have any obvious weaknesses. He has never suffered major defeats. He dares to fight at critical moments and is able to fight his way out of desperate situations. He's a brave general, not a wise one. Eliza's strong point was that although she usually had a sharp tongue and often gave me surprises, she would never make any mistakes when it came to proper business. I asked her to provide me information on the enemy. Although she gave me a bunch of random information, she also gave me what I wanted. A practical general who isn't an academic? Doesn't that mean he's an antique? That's rather troublesome. Huh, no weaknesses and no strengths? Isn't that just another way of saying that he's full of weaknesses? May I ask what you think an academic military strategist is? A bookworm who only knows how to use classic tactics. All he needs to do is draw a circle, and the enemy will crawl into it. He's super easy to deal with. Do you want to know your own evaluation? One of them is about how you use troops. Yep, you have one. Of course, I'm intending to buy one from the fairies when I get back. It's great that you have one. Undying Roland, Roland Mist, the last prince of the Mist Kingdom. His other famous identity is the strongest undead mage in recent times, Emperor Yongya. He's also the direct creator of the Shillua Empire and the highest leader in name. He's ranked 33rd on the Calamity rankings because of this. As for why he's called Undying, it's because he has an inconceivable ability to revive. He's also one of the few existences who's able to reincarnate and retain his sense of self. He's also the only existence who can revive multiple times. According to an insider, he's incredibly sly and holds grudges. If you're unlucky enough to meet him and offend him, it's said that he'll unhesitatingly use 100 years to take revenge. And if you really do offend him, he'll definitely be undying. That's why I hope you're on your own. Of course, you can also consider our Fairy Insurance's life insurance service. It's impossible for us to help you, but we can at least send the insurance to your descendants. According to unverifiable information, the latest information from this year. He once transformed into the Baron Blackhand, Roland Chainham, and the Aurora Sword Saint, Rollo Tambor, to travel around the world. Before the reason why he's undying is revealed, it'll probably be the end of the world. He'll still be alive and well. I'll say it again, don't ever offend him. Otherwise, when you're old, this incredibly shameless scammer of love might come looking for your granddaughter to date. This is the exact words of an insider who claims to have been scammed by him in the past. The insider is said to be his senior schoolmate. This information is highly reliable. From this, it can be seen that he's quite a playboy. All right then, should I exclaim that I've finally found a soulmate? Although this sounded like a disgusting description of a creature that couldn't die no matter what, and although this description was filled with malice, at least some secrets were correct. And then I viciously glared at Amelia, who was pretending to be innocent. A senior schoolmate whose feelings were scammed? Amelia, no matter how you think about it, it's always you. You actually dare to slander me? At the very least, my angry glare was met with a cold sneer from a certain senior schoolmate. At the very least, you should give me half of the information fee. Why are you taking this free money for yourself? Is that the point? Hey, Roland, you're even more shameless than before. All right, I ignored the astonished Amelia and brought my attention back to the main topic at hand. Eliza was still reading the information about me. No matter if he's the Prince of the Mist Kingdom, Emperor Yongya, or even the Baron Blackhand, he has records of leading armies in battle, and his tactics are basically the same. One of the main reasons why Yongya was able to sweep through all the countries was because of his outstanding military strategy. Yongya loved to use surprise troops, but he wasn't afraid of direct combat. Yongya's most obvious trait was that he wouldn't fight head-on unless he had absolute confidence in winning. The most typical example would be when he fought against the Elven Kingdom of Sobe. The Elven Kingdom's main army was 3 times larger than his, and they even had the Radiance Blade elite army, which was the bane of the undead. However, Yongya sent out a large number of elite troops to harass and restrain the Elven Kingdom's main army. The Elven Kingdom's main army was split into small groups, and the Elven Kingdom's main army was forced to stall for 1.5 years. In the end, the Elven Kingdom's undead army was able to obtain victory through battle. It would seem that my evaluation of Yongya was quite accurate. At the very least, I didn't miss out on the battle that I was most proud of. Yongya's tactics weren't anything new. It was nothing more than a variation of guerrilla warfare. However, only the undead, who weren't afraid of sacrificing themselves, would be able to carry out such suicidal harassment tactics to the end. When he was a human prince, Yongya left behind some of his books. Guerrilla tactics, gathering intelligence is the #1 task in war. Our goal is the Sea of Stars. Be a coward before you can win. Yongya's flexible and ever-changing tactics had a deep influence on the later generations. Yongya's books mentioned the Beast Slaughter Order, which was a long-term bounty system that used human heads in exchange for bounty money. Although there was endless criticism, it had a major impact on the later generations. Yongya's plan to use his elite aerial cavalry to attack the Beastman tribes and cut off their retreat route, as well as poison and pollute their water sources, gave Yongya a fearsome reputation among the Beastmen. However, from a certain standpoint, the Beastman tribes who suffered the greatest loss in history also had the longest period of peace in modern times. The Northlands were peaceful for more than 50 years, but it was also because of this that the Beastman tribes, which recovered their vitality, became strong once again. That was why the Beastmen invaded the South on the largest scale in the past 1,000 years. Due to Yongya's excellent tactics, his military theories and tactics had a great influence, and his outstanding military achievements. Yongya was once ranked 68th on the list of famous generals in history. However, due to the protests of various countries that had historical ties with him and the pressure from the various gods' churches, Yongya was finally removed from the list. However, Yongya's military achievements and ability to command troops were indeed on the war god ranking. Also, due to his indestructible nature, he would probably remain in the top 40 of the list for a long time. I didn't know how to evaluate Yongya's words. In the end, I could only sigh that I was too young back then, and that I was too extreme in my actions. However, from a certain standpoint, I felt a little more confident. I didn't believe that the dark-skinned big guy wouldn't buy my information. Since he knew about my information, he would more or less feel a little guilty. After all, Yongye was ranked last on the list of famous generals in history, while I was evaluated as a famous general in history. With such a comparison, it was natural that I was ranked higher. Among those in the same profession, it was natural that those who were more famous and powerful would speak more forcefully. At this moment, Yongye seemed to have become uncomfortable with the silence after my words, so he took the initiative to ask me a question. His words were respectful, but his tone was a little harsh. "Your Highness Roland, may I know what you think is wrong with my strategy? Please enlighten me." I smiled as I looked at Yongye's serious expression. In that case, since it was time for negotiation, I would do the same thing as before. First, I would throw out a heavy bomb to scare him. If you only look at the enemy on paper, you aren't wrong. In fact, your strategy is quite appropriate. As long as you execute it well, you have at least an 80% chance of winning. Hearing this, Yongye seemed to think that he had received my praise. He rubbed his chin and smiled. However, I didn't finish my sentence. For the past 3 days, my scouts have been constantly traveling around and gathering information from all sides. Only after enough information had been gathered would I make a judgment. But I still have to say that your strategy is basically sending your soldiers to their deaths. You only see the threat on the chessboard, but you've completely forgotten about the other players who haven't entered the game yet. The Earth Elemental God, Omdarokin, has always been supporting the Blood Axe tribe. Do you think that they won't interfere in such an important battle like attacking Antun? I personally witnessed the formation of Rain City in the Ottoman Empire. The Water Elemental God and her people directly participated in the invasion of the Ottoman Empire. They don't have many restrictions, so it would be foolish to underestimate any of the ancient evil gods. In my opinion, when your army is fighting against the enemy, the earthquake and the sudden appearance of the Earth Elemental God would be the best ambush. At this point, everyone's faces had already turned ashen. It was obvious that they had long since forgotten about the existence of the ancient evil gods and believed that they wouldn't interfere in a battle between mortals. Looking at Yongye's shocked expression, I laughed. Since I had the right to speak, then my next information bomb would be even more frightening. Blindly advancing without sufficient information support. I think that you're completely suicidal, and you've missed out on more than just one point. Yongye wanted to argue, but after hesitating for a moment, he finally shook his head and didn't say anything. Missing out on Omdarokin is only one of the reasons for your defeat, and it's not the most fatal. I know that you've definitely made preparations, so don't refute me. But you've also missed out on a dangerous opponent. No, from the very start, you've never treated them as enemies. On the contrary, in your eyes, they're trustworthy allies. After all, we haven't had a war for so many years. You're saying? Impossible. Could it be from the west? Could it be that the Wolf King is heading there? No, it's indeed possible. Recently, their situation has been very strange. If that's the case, then the Wolf King's movements can be explained. As soon as I finished speaking, all the generals present stood up. This time, the black-faced Yongye was so shocked that his face paled. If this information was true, the entire world would be shocked. Yes, Iman's influence is far greater than you've expected. Wolf King Sostero and Foxage are both his hardcore supporters. They've split their forces and headed west, intending to open up Fort Akisi from the back, allowing the Elven army to enter. Yes, you're right. Our most trustworthy allies with long ears have decided to stand on the opposite side from the start. They have too many grievances to settle with us. The elves are about to declare war on the humans, and the elven gods are about to start a divine war against the human gods, and our northern lands are about to become the battlefield of the divine war. Chapter 154. Beautiful and long-lived elves lived in peaceful forests. Pure and kind, they lived a simple and self-sufficient life, living in harmony with nature. Once the world was threatened by evil, they would not hesitate to fight it to the end. Fairy tales should be told to children. If such a race that was pure to the point of stupidity really existed in this cruel world, they would have long been tricked into becoming cannon fodder in some grand battle and perished. In Aichi, these long-eared fellows were doing quite well. They may be beautiful, but they were not kind or stupid. As a powerful race, for the benefit of the race, they had plenty of underhanded methods. Pure and kind? Which plane of existence are these elves from? My impression of elves is that they're a bunch of narrow-minded, long-eared creatures. They're pretty and live for a long time, but they're not pure or kind at all. They're arrogant, unreasonable, and vengeful. Those are their three most typical characteristics. Arrogance came from their history. As a race that once occupied more than 70% of the continent, when the elven gods are the most powerful gods in the world, they used to have everything. They regarded the short-lived humans as nouveau riche with no background. Their long lifespan, long heritage, magic and martial arts heritage all gave them the right to look down on other races. Like the fairies, the elves also had many branches. But unlike the fairies, whose members were almost equal, the elves had a very strong concept of hierarchy. Bloodline represented rank, and this rank could not be surpassed. Like the first generation of humans, the Golden Race, the High Elves had gone extinct. However, their direct descendants, creations, the Wood Elves, Moon Elves, Night Elves, and Silver Elves are the four major elven aristocrats above the ordinary elves. In this era, they had all built their own kingdoms and had at least the status of a noble. It was worth mentioning that Heloise, the princess of the ancient elven empire, was a high elf who had gone extinct long ago. They were the legendary Golden Elves. The cultural heritage they left behind was a treasure that all the elven empires coveted. Many elven royal families claimed that they were descendants of the ancient elven empire. Of course, even the elves themselves would not take it seriously. After all, everyone did things like glorifying their ancestors. However, to the extent that even they themselves believed it was ridiculous. It was a good thing that the Sumeter race did not exist in this world. History and reality were often quite different. Legends said that the Gold Elves were perfect and pure, yet Heloise was like this. We all knew that the truth was often cruel. Princes were often perverts, while princesses were either brainless or just flower vases. Silly cat, if you dare to bite me, I'll throw you into a gnome cannon and shoot you out right now. I mean what I say. Cough, where did I get dark? Yep, since the topic had been brought up, let's continue with the Dark Elves. From a certain standpoint, it really was a Dark Elf this time. Dark Elves were actually an extension of the Elves' strange hierarchy and rules. There were no Dark Elves in this world until the Night Elves were banished to the underworld. The elven gods banished Rose, and the three elven nobles joined forces to banish the Night Elves. The reason? It was said that they had stepped into a taboo and were in cahoots with chaos. As for what the taboo was, I did not know. However, based on the strange birth rate of the Dark Elves, it was most likely that their bloodline had been altered. In modern times, other than the people involved, the gods, no one could say for sure. The four noble elves were superior elves of the Silver bloodline, the weakest of the Silver bloodlines. Even they were forbidden from intermarrying. In the ancient elven empire, they were not even allowed to converse or engage in work that was not regulated by their race. The Gold Elves were kings, the Silver Elves were natural warriors, the Wood Elves were priests who communicated with nature, the Moon Elves were the administrative hub of the entire race, and the Night Elves were responsible for the shadowy business. As for the other intermediate elves, Low Elves, and the mixed-blood Wild Elves who were viewed as a disgrace, they were definitely the vassals of the four noble elves. Most of them were the Bronze race, while the mixed-blood Wild Elves were the Iron race. However, there were a few mutants who had the potential to surpass the superior elves. The rules set by the ancient elven empire were still brought up by many antiques. The four superior elves served the Gold Elves, while the other elves served the four superior elves. This social structure was viewed as the foundation of elven society. When a person's future was determined by their birth, the metabolism of this society would be inconceivably slow. The gap between the various social classes would only grow larger and larger, and conflicts would only remain hidden and not disappear. Alright, the superior elves were all of the silver race, while the ordinary elves were all of the bronze race and iron race. Compared to the unranked humans, the elves were indeed powerful in the past. They did have the advantage of looking down on other races. The only thing that restricted them was their extremely low fertility rate and long growth period. This was also the main reason why Kolos, as a wild elf, felt uneasy when she saw the wood elf Kelly. Even though the wood elf race had declined, the restraint that was trapped in her bloodline still made her feel uneasy when facing the superior elves. This kind of social structure undoubtedly had a fatal hidden danger. When the ancient elven empire was destroyed, and when the gold elves went extinct, the top of the pyramid was lost. Without a doubt, the 4 superior elves became the new top, and a country with 4 top powers would undoubtedly be the cause of the future division. Even the elven gods were divided into 4. So how could the country not be divided in the future? From the description of Heloise, the person who bore a deep grudge against her, the reason why the ancient elven empire was destroyed and the empire divided was closely related to the current order gods, especially the elven gods. But I have to say, from a certain perspective, they did ask for it. The gold elves were originally an ancient species. In their eyes, it was natural for them to not give face to the younger generation of true gods. Before becoming a god, they were my vassals. In the blink of an eye, they turned their backs on me. When this kind of thinking was widespread, the true gods really turned their backs on them. But ironically, this also became the point where the elven race turned from prosperity to decline. If the elven race didn't have internal strife, naturally, there wouldn't be the rise of the humans. Let us ignore the long process and look at the results directly. After a series of changes, the gold elves were all dead. The current elven race was divided into hundreds of kingdoms that spread across the entire world. The 4 superior elves weren't much better off either. Among them, the night elves were reduced to the dark elves of the underground world. The wood elves had long declined to the point where they didn't even have their own kingdom. Although the moon elves and silver elves were the main forces of the royal families of the kingdom of the elves, due to the many grudges between them, the relationship between the 2 parties couldn't be considered good. According to what I know, the few kingdoms of the elves of the western border of the northern lands are all led by the moon kingdom of the elves. They have always claimed that they are the only direct descendants of the ancient elven empire. There are 4 of them who claim to be the elven kings. In the entire northern lands, I am probably the one who understands the elf the most. But it isn't a good thing to understand them. The one who understands you the most is usually your mortal enemy. The grudges between me and them are extremely deep. As the victors of the last holy war 1,700 years ago, the humans occupied the most fertile land in the entire continent. As the losers, the other races didn't fare as well. The water tribe went to the deep sea and became the sea tribe. The beastmen were chased into the frozen lands of the northern lands. Even the elves, who were also part of the law of order, could only close their borders in the face of the overbearing human kingdoms. Allies? Allies will chase you into remote areas and forests. Allies will organize hunting parties and make your people into the best sellers in the slave market. Allies will first learn your magic and knowledge, and then turn on you in the blink of an eye. Allies will restrict your supply of resources and use worthless salt to exchange for our precious magical artifacts. There was no need to say anything else. From the perspective of the entire species, the humans were indeed quite unkind. Not mentioning anything else, just the slave trade alone had thoroughly offended the elves. Many nobles of the northern lands took pride in keeping female elves as slaves. In fact, they even tried to get their hands on the superior elves. The natural and pleasant wood elves, the pure and holy moon elves, and the valiant silver elves had all been auctioned for sky-high prices, which led to several wars. Humans would turn to dust in 100 years, but the elves wouldn't. Coincidentally, the elves were famous for their excellent memory, and this memory naturally included grudges. The grudges of their grandparents from 3 generations ago were like yesterday to the elves. If their enemies were no longer around, they could still find other families or countries to take revenge on. But if they were gone, then they might as well hang their grudges under the entire human species. When hatred and grudges accumulated to a certain extent, there would be a day when it would erupt. And if it were to erupt during times of peace, the Order gods wouldn't ignore it, and the Order gods, with the human gods as the main force, would most likely continue to side with the humans. Thus, the timing of the eruption was fixed from the very start. It could only happen during the Holy War, and when the final obstacle, the elven gods, made up their minds to change factions, what else could stop the elves from breaking off from the humans? Since the elven gods were able to betray their original masters, it wouldn't matter if they betrayed their allies once more. For those who had experienced betrayal before, loyalty was meaningless. Whether they would betray their allies a second time or not would depend on whether the price offered by their new opponents was high enough. The above information could be deduced by those who were observant, but there was something else that I found out myself. Key of the Moon Plan. It seemed like a beautiful name, but in reality, it was literally the door to the Moon Plan. The core of the plan was simple: to prepare for the Holy War and open the door to the Central Plains. And 300 years ago, the door to the north was blocked by a powerful country, and to the elves, 300 years was like yesterday. Yes, the destruction of the Mist Kingdom couldn't have been helped by the elves in the dark. That cardinal who wanted to harm me even received 2 female silver elves who came to him of their own accord. From the very start, the destruction of the Mist Kingdom wasn't due to a powerful enemy, but rather the backstabbing. The backstabbing came from both the human kingdom and the pure and kind elven allies. It wasn't easy to destroy a country. Back then, it was due to the collusion of many scheming people that the Mist Kingdom was ultimately destroyed. In my second life, I incarnated as the Baron Blackhand, Roland Charnham. Yep, it's a homonym for investigating the inside story. However, I also fell on the path of investigation, and the ones who did it were the armies of the Kingdom of the Elves. In my third life, when I was Roland, I traveled to quite a few of the Kingdom of the Elves and collected quite a bit of information from the Elven Kingdom's archives and libraries. I even visited many small places like the Elven Palace. This led to the Yongya army's frenzied vengeance, and the Kingdom of the Elves became my first choice for vengeance. At the height of my frenzy, I was still hesitant to destroy the human kingdoms with forbidden spells, but I didn't hesitate to use them on the elves, wiping out several elven kingdoms. Based on the elves' vengeful personality, I would probably forever be at the top of their wanted list, and it was inevitable that they would seek me out for vengeance. Of course, it isn't a good habit to make judgments based on subjective impressions. However, I was wary of the elves from the very start, so when I heard that the Wolf King was heading west, I had already sent out scouts and rangers. The elven scouts under me also brought back sufficient intelligence for me. I have been here for 3 days, waiting for the report from my scouts. The Moonblade army of the Tassel Kingdom of the Elves has already left their encampment and headed east. The other Kingdom of the Elves are also doing the same. Do you think that those long ears are here to help us? It is impossible for there to be no news of the unusual movements in the Kingdom of the Elves. The collaboration between the elven gods and the malevolent gods of chaos has been noticed by the Order gods. The announcements and warnings from the Church have been frequent in recent years. The moment my judgment came out, while everyone was shocked, they skipped the questioning phase and started thinking about how to deal with it. How is this possible? Aren't the elves and beastmen enemies? Are you dumb? As long as there is a common enemy, enemies can become allies. Besides allies, ask the female elves in your house first. It can't be that all the elves intend to break off their relationship with the humans. Which race is it, or is it just a tribe? Don't be in a hurry to make a judgment. We have to check the authenticity first. Your Highness, I don't know if I am doubting you, but can you provide more relevant intelligence? Amidst the clamor, I turned around and left, intending to leave immediately. The intelligence that I threw out this time is too important. The generals of the various countries need to check the authenticity and organize their reports, so that this blind march that is destined to fail will definitely be stopped. This has already achieved my goal. Under the current chaotic situation, It is impossible for anything to be discussed today. I still have many things to do, so I don't have the mood to waste my time with them. These fellows can't be counted on at all. The Borealis should be arriving soon. Since the reinforcements have arrived, this time, it is time for us to go all out. New weapons, new battle tactics, new battle occupations will definitely change the entire world. Let this unavoidable war become my new experimental field. Chapter 155. The Akisi fortress was known by the elves as Shinka Eagle Shinka. In the elven language, it meant land of sin. As the closest human fortress to the northern elven kingdom, it was the only way to the elven kingdoms, as well as the countless slave hunters. Naturally, it was the largest slave trading center in the entire northern elven kingdom. In the region where many elves lived, the elves in the northern lands were considered relatively weak. Furthermore, the neighboring kingdom of Slawir was only a small country in the northern lands. It was powerless and didn't want to obstruct the trade of merchants from other countries. Thus, this trade route became a disaster area for the elven trade. Second-hand dealers with connections, agents who picked up fresh and special goods for the major nobles, mercenaries who had no bottom line waiting to be hired, and the city guards and soldiers who were bribed to turn a blind eye to what was going on. From a certain point of view, the elves weren't wrong to call this place a land of sins. When the profits exceeded 100%, the merchants dared to take risks. When the profits exceeded 3,000%, the merchants dared to trample all the laws in the world. Young elves, elven males, elven females, ordinary elves, superior elves, half-elves, and so on brought in huge profits. Every year, there would always be guests coming and going. From a certain standpoint, the reason why the Mist Kingdom was hated by so many back then was also an important reason why they blocked the elven trade. Ironically, in order to destroy this country, the elves even sent their own noble daughters to the Mist Kingdom. In the end, the Mist Kingdom's gates were opened, but the heartless bandits were also able to enter. Was this what the decision-makers of the Mist Kingdom hoped for? Of course, if you asked him, you wouldn't get an answer. That was because he and his kingdom were frozen in ice. The Ice Age could still keep them fresh for a few hundred years, and they might even thaw one day. But today, this blood-stained fortress finally welcomed its end. Of course, there were also the slave traders. When the Beastmen army suddenly attacked from the back, the Moonblade army of the Kingdom of the Elves suddenly attacked a merchant's temporary camp. They were here to rescue their kidnapped princess. When the kidnapped Moon Elf princess was found in the underground chamber of the merchant group, all the elves present were furious, and their small-scale attack immediately escalated into a riot. Under the incitement of some people, the elven slaves also rioted. They killed the prison guards and the guards of the merchant caravan, seized the weapons, and opened the city gates. Then there was the inevitable ethnic cleansing. This time, the proud elves didn't reject the Beastmen's help. They felt that the Beastmen's actions were more satisfying and even praised the Beastmen's brutal killing methods. Soon, a resignation letter was about to be handed over to Antoon, who was being attacked by the orcs. The Kingdom of the Elves and the three elven kingdoms officially declared war on Slawir. The sudden war between the third parties shocked the whole world. Countless letters floated to the north like snowflakes. The messengers of the church moved back and forth, but the channels of communication were blocked from the beginning. At this moment, in the Tassel Kingdom's Moonblade Squad's place of protection, the leader of the Moonblade Squad, Alvin New Leaf, had a worried expression on his face. As far as he could see, a wounded Moon Elf girl was sleeping soundly on a bed in a room. "Your Majesty, you're too cruel. Her Highness Swana is still underage. She's your only daughter." As a Moon Elf noble, Alvin was related by blood to the Tassel Kingdom's Prince Adrian. From a certain standpoint, this wounded Moon Elf princess was his biological niece. As the executor of the Key of the Moon project, while the other elves were angrily hanging the slave merchants to death, Alvin knew the entire story. Those damned old bastards, they actually forced Her Highness Swana to her death. Swana New Moon, the princess of the Tassel Kingdom, was the only descendant of the current Elven King. In order to pass the war plan and obtain the support of the Elven Senate, She became a sacrificial pawn in a political exchange. The next Elven king would be the nephew of the Elven Senate's first elder. As for why Swanna became a sacrificial pawn, apart from the exchange of political benefits, the more important reason was that the young Swanna was the leader of the peace faction. Around her, there was a group of elves who supported the peace faction. If Swanna, who was deeply loved by the elves, was killed, it would incite all the elves' anger and hatred. With the elves' anger unable to be quelled, there would be no more obstacles to this war. In order for Swanna to truly have the desired effect, the cruel plotters chose the cruelest slave merchants and the most disgusting buyers. A single well-planned encounter with a vicious slave hunter caused the noble princess to end up like this. Water, water. Her weak shout caused all the female officials present to hurriedly take action. Alvin finally couldn't bear to watch the princess' pitiful state any longer. Your Highness, if you have any other requests, just tell me directly. Alvin, will definitely do it for you. Swanna's body and mind were both severely injured. Anyone with a discerning eye would know that it was impossible for Swanna to survive. In the end, Alvin, who couldn't bear to watch any longer, made his own promise. This would be his final limit. He decided to do whatever it took to fulfill the princess' expectations. Revenge! Revenge! Hearing this, Alvin was stunned. Inexplicably suffering such misfortune, it was no wonder that the heart of the little princess, who was originally anti-war, was also filled with resentment. However, the pitiful her still didn't know who the real enemy was. Swanna's dry lips slightly opened and closed, as if she wanted to say something, but she was too weak to say anything. Alvin hurriedly moved closer, only to hear the mosquito-like moans. Don't avenge me. I want peace. I don't want war. Her originally fair face was full of knife scars. After struggling to finish her last wish, she was sure that her uncle had heard her. The most beautiful rose in the tassel lost its last color of blood. She gave up her yearning for survival, withered and died. When the news of the death of the beloved Swanna of the elves spread, all the elves fell into a frenzy. Her Highness is dead. Her Highness is actually dead. It's all because of those damn humans that Her Highness ended up like this. Revenge. Blood for blood. A tooth for a tooth. How can these villains be enough? We will use the blood of their wives and daughters as a sacrifice to Her Highness Swanna's soul in heaven. No, the elves' revenge is 10 times the amount. We will use 10 times the amount of blood as a sacrifice. Angry roars echoed through the sky. Even the gentle female officials were declaring that they would not hesitate to take revenge. Among everyone, the only one who heard Swanna's last words was Alvin, but he had nothing to say. He felt the world spinning around him. He opened his mouth, wanting to say something, but in the end he thought too much and his brain was in a daze. He still couldn't say a single word. Your Highness, please forgive me. I'm afraid that I'm going to say something wrong. No one can stop now. And this time, I'm fighting against the destroyer of the country. Perhaps I'll be able to apologize to you in person very soon. When the news of Swanna's death and the elves' declaration of war arrived, I wasn't surprised at all. I should say that if my inference was correct, and the elves really intended to betray the Order faction, Swanna would definitely die, and most likely, she would die a horrible death. The reason? Actually, there wasn't much of a reason. At the very least, they needed a reason to start a war. This was especially so for the elves, a race that believed themselves to be righteous and peace-loving. They needed a reason that everyone could accept. Swanna herself was the perfect sacrifice. She had a great reputation, and she had always been against war. She advocated living in harmony with humans, hoping to solve all problems through communication. She had long since become a thorn in the side of the pro-war faction and even the elven gods. Why did I know about her? Was I familiar with her? When she was born, I was imprisoned in Sulphur Mountain City. I didn't have any contact with her, nor did I know her. But I didn't know about her. As expected, the real world isn't so dramatic. The lucky Swanna was unable to become the Elven Empress. In the game's history, she was the leader of the pro-peace faction. She issued a series of inconceivably difficult epic quests. With the combined help of elven and human players, she finally wiped out the pro-war faction, including her father and the Elder Council. She ascended to the throne and even competed for the position of Elven Empress in the future. Only then did the elves finally remain in the Order faction. Ever since I discovered that the 4 elemental gods weren't sealed by the players according to the historical script, I knew that there were many idiotic traps in that so-called walkthrough. At the very least, the major events that the players participated in the game's history would definitely be completely different. Reality wasn't a game. This mistake gave me a huge blow to my head. And so, I cleaned up the game's history. When I measured the game's history using the real world as the standard, I really did find many loopholes. The mysterious collapse of the 4 elemental gods was to give the players a greater sense of participation and accomplishment in the game's history. It also prevented enemies that were impossible to defeat in the early stages of the game. But, judging from the mysterious development of the story, it was likely that the game's scriptwriters had completely disregarded the truth and created the Hand of God. As for the legendary life of the Light of New Moon and Lucky Moon Empress Swanna, it was even more inconceivable. How she got to know the player heroes in a desperate situation, how she exposed the series of conspiracies of her father and the Elder Council, how she finally reached a peace agreement, allowing the humans and elves to tide through the difficult times together, the coincidences within that could be used to buy a lottery ticket. The difficulty of breaking through the encirclement far exceeded that of the unarmed Dragon Slayer. That series of continuous twists and turns in the legendary story could definitely be written into a best-selling novel. Damn it, this is another trap. Looks like the scriptwriters were the ones who made the elven players stay in the Order faction. That's true. After all, that is a game. Who would be able to accept the sudden change of factions? But HE is a real world, and there are no so-called main characters in the story. But the continent of HE wasn't a game, and Swanna wasn't the child of destiny. So, she died, and her death was incomparably pitiful. In the end, the truth of her death became the fuse for the war that she hated the most. Without a doubt, this was a perfect irony, and even more so, a warning to me. I only have one chance left. If I fail this time, it will be over for me. Any kind of wishful thinking is unacceptable. Everything has to be considered in the worst-case scenario. No matter how well prepared you are, it's never too much. But at this moment, I was a little regretful. It was best to know when to stop. Aren't you guys going overboard? I only requested a few pieces of equipment to complement my new job. What did you guys prepare for me? The person in front of me, the deputy captain of the Aurora, Pierre Papin, was currently demonstrating the equipment that I requested. Sailor equipment? Fake beast ears? Are you sure these are all weapons and equipment? Why want our individual communication devices and enchanted armor? Are you sure you didn't hear wrongly? The tight-fitting female sailor outfit was worn on the muscular man's body. The strong muscles beneath the tight-fitting outfit were so obvious that it was disgusting. Beneath the skirt were 2 thick legs. Furthermore, this muscular man who was wearing sunglasses had intentionally put on some cute fox ears and a tail. The scene was truly unbearable to look at. Yes, Your Highness. These are the equipment that you requested. Look, this fake ear has a built-in voice transmission spell. The magic bullet within it can provide more than 200 short-range calls. Also, it has an expanded ear design that can increase the transmission rate of sound waves. It's an extremely ingenious design. As for this personal enchanted armor, don't be fooled by its lightweight. As long as the magic bullet within it is activated, it can become as hard as steel. Furthermore, it's so light that it can be used as undergarments. You can even add a layer of armor on top of it. With 2 layers of protection, you can feel more at ease. Also, this foxtail isn't just for decoration. There's a miniature energy pool within it that is sufficient to charge all the equipment on your body 3 times. It can be used by individual soldiers for more than 3 hours. Needless to say, I personally experimented with this equipment and was astonished to find that it was extremely effective. Many theoretical problems were easily solved, and the completion rate was much higher than expected. Who's the designer? I want to have a heart-to-heart talk with him. Did our technology advance so quickly? Is it appropriate to use such advanced technology on something like this? Can't you be more normal and make a thin armor and a communication headset or something? The chief designer, Timmy Lade, also came. At that time, someone asked him, but his answer was only by being more discreet will it be of great use. Besides, cuteness is justice. It seemed that this was his insistence as a designer, and no one was able to convince him otherwise. At this point, Pierre shook his head regretfully. It wasn't because he was unable to convince the other party, but because the other party was unwilling to listen to his suggestion to add warship parts into the sample. It seems that people with different beliefs cannot make plans together. This little kid has never been able to understand the romance of giant steel warships and heavy cannons. Obviously, the warship girls are the most beautiful, but according to your instructions, he should be selling a simplified version of the enchanted armor and a communication beast ear to the allied armies. Yep, he has a very high opinion of your creativity and is full of praise for using the allied armies as a platform for experimentation. Little Timmy, I couldn't help but think of the little kid under my older sister's protection. I even suspected that his rise to fame was due to another hand of God. How did he grow up so quickly? It seems that many things have happened, but he's clearly a kid. Why do these designs remind him of an uncle with ill intentions? Wait, you said that he's selling a weakened version of the magic equipment to the allied armies, including these messy things? Yep. There's a report from Lady Olivia about this. She asked you to look into it in detail. The products for sale this time are all from Timmy Lade's designs. There are 27 types of beast ears, cat ears, dog ears, fox ears, and so on. There are 19 types of enchanted armor, one-piece swimsuits, bikinis, black sexy lingerie, and so on. There are 4 types of magic swords that can't be recharged in one go, 300 of them, and 4 types of magic explosive grenades, 2,000 of them. All of them are the weakened versions with special additives. The data can be directly sent back to the headquarters. May I ask, is there a problem? There's a huge problem. Can these things be sold? How am I supposed to face people tomorrow? The moment I thought of my men selling sexy lingerie to the generals of the various countries, I felt like digging a hole and burying myself in it. Perhaps this information would be sent back to the various countries tomorrow. Am I supposed to wait for everyone to laugh at me for walking down the path of a pervert? It's not too late yet. I must stop him. He should have left not long ago, right? Yep, just hurry up and stop him. It would be even better if he was alone. He would probably be treated as a child's prank. After all, adults would be able to understand the pranks of naughty children. Yep, they could barely understand it. Thinking of this, I felt a little relieved. No, Lord Shuity came as well. He even volunteered to be the model. The last time I saw him, he was wearing a pink midriff-bearing swimsuit with rabbit ears. I have to say, that was truly a tragedy. The researchers vomited on the spot. Your appearance isn't convincing at all. How much better can you be? Hurry up and stop him. Compared to the macho sailor suit in front of me, just imagining that stupid cow wearing a pink one-piece swimsuit was enough to blind everyone. Furthermore, he was even wearing rabbit ears to act cute. I felt that it was better for the world to be destroyed. At the very least, I wouldn't lose all my face because of this. Then, I knew that there was no need to stop him. Hurry up and chase after him. That beastman pervert escaped in that direction. Ugh, our brothers are vomiting from the disgust. Can we chase after him later? We must catch him before more victims appear. Where's the hunter? Let's chase after him. What's the point of chasing? Just follow the fainted and vomiting citizens. Even my little darling fainted from fright. He is a military dog that has been trained for close to 10 years. His dog eyes were blinded by the light. After taking a glance outside the window, I immediately covered my eyes and squatted down. You fellows really have no limits. Next month, I will transfer you all to the mines to dig holes. There was no need to mention the Tauren who was walking at the very front. The muscular man who was more than 2 meters tall was wearing a swimsuit designed for young girls. It was a complete blasphemy. There was no need to describe it at all. Just the way the muscles under the swimsuit trembled as he ran was enough to blind all onlookers. Behind him was a bunch of surprises. The Goblin Kabbalah was wearing a white nurse's uniform that was trending these days. However, his entire being seemed to be on edge. No matter how one looked at him, he looked like a mental patient that needed to be taken care of. Cassio was wearing a black bikini. The centaur that covered his chest made it impossible for one to look at him directly. The left head of the two-headed ogre had cat ears, while the right head had dog ears. He was also wearing a maid outfit, and his bloody mouth was smeared with bright red lipstick. As a maid lover, I was instantly blinded by his appearance. As for Beifong, he was currently very normal. His eyes were glowing as he looked at his companion, who was wearing the beast ears, as though he was considering whether to include him in the hunting range. From the bottom of my heart, I rejected the design of the beast ear communication device. With Beifong around, this was too dangerous. You bunch of bastards. I would rather all of you run around naked. Chapter 156. In my office, a debate was going on about truth and culture, and I was being challenged by the younger generation. A race that openly belittles the culture of other races has no future. Those stupid long ears are the most obvious example. When you see the new and foreign cultures as scourges and ferocious beasts, you have also sealed the door to your own advancement. Yeah, you're right. Being stuck in a rut will only lead to rigid thinking, and eventually you will be eliminated by the times. That's why we need to learn from the cultural traditions of other races. Perhaps he might be seen as a punk today, vulgar and absurd, but in the eyes of future generations, he might be seen as a classic. Any artist that transcends the era at the very beginning will not be accepted by the times. Yeah, indeed, there are many such examples. Many of the current classics were also non-mainstream in the past. The non-mainstream bands of the past have now become superstars, and those weird jigsaw puzzles that were clearly malfunctioning are actually impressionist masterpieces. It's hard for an old antique like me to understand. Perhaps I will never be able to understand, but I will not hinder the development of new things. On the contrary, I will study and absorb them. It's great that you can understand. Your Highness, if we want to move forward into a new era of blooming flowers, we must acknowledge the culture and personal preferences of other races. Respecting and trying to understand is the beginning of all communication. And the reason why this world is so chaotic is because of the lack of people like you who are educated and reasonable. Hee, little Timmy, you really know how to talk. I'm overjoyed. Then what about my design? Hee, it still won't do. Looking at the exasperated Timmy Lade, I smiled cruelly. You made me lose so much face. The whole world says that I'm a petty person who holds grudges, but I'll show you how I hold grudges. You said so much just to let your cat ear communicator, beast tail energy pool, swimsuit series armor pass. Are you tired? Or do you think that I will be tricked so easily? Fine. I have always respected the traditions of other races. But are you sure that your perverted designs are all out of normal aesthetic sense and not to satisfy your own selfish desires? Do you dare to knock on your conscience and swear on your sister's reputation? All right, Timmy Lade was speechless, but I continued to add insult to injury. Besides, even if it's for your own selfish desires, your considerations are too simple. Everyone says that maid costumes look good, and you know that I do like maid costumes. But do you know how it feels to be wearing a maid costume on a muscular man with a 3-foot waist? My corium dog eyes were blinded, and my worldview was ruined. I stared at Eliza for the whole night before I recovered. You're simply too naive. You only think about the youthful cuteness of a bikini girl, but you haven't thought about how scary a bikini grandmother is. You only think about the youthful appearance of a sailor girl, but you haven't thought about the older female sorcerer in a sailor suit. Not to mention the uncles in bikinis who have hair on their legs and chest. My dog eyes were blinded, and I had a nightmare. This time, I wasn't spouting nonsense. I could even describe the scene in my dream. In my nightmare, a group of muscular men dressed in maid costumes walked in a neat formation and saluted me. They raised their butts and walked like a cat, and they even raised their little witch wands and shouted slogans. Forget about "I will punish you on behalf of the moon," "love and courage," But what about the mental pollution of Nico, Nico, Nico? I didn't take my medicine today, so I feel so cute. Also, don't tell me that I haven't studied before. What does it mean to raise one arm and shout, "Hey, King of Gentlemen"? That's too obvious a plagiarism. I am not the King of Gentlemen. My angry roar could be heard outside the walls, but that was only the beginning of my venting. Due to that strange military parade, I actually woke up in fright and couldn't sleep for half the night. I stared at Eliza with bloodshot eyes, making her think that I had gone completely insane. Hoodlums aren't scary, but it's scary that hoodlums are cultured. Perverts aren't scary, but it's scary that perverts are knowledgeable. Naughty children aren't scary, but it's scary that no one can beat them up. I had never been so pitiful in so many years. Even my reputation was developing in a strange direction. How could I not take revenge? Naughty children must be disciplined. The more twisted they are, the more they need to be corrected. Otherwise, they'll evolve into super naughty children sooner or later. Asterisk snap. Asterisk with a snap of my fingers, the door opened, and a group of muscular men entered. They were all muscular men, but they were all wearing Tim Ladd's designs. All right, for the sake of today's lunch, I won't describe them in detail. At any rate, even if I closed my eyes in time, the sound of muscles clashing against each other was nauseating. I have a general idea of what you like. Since it's your own design, you should have a good taste. Wait, Your Highness, I know I was wrong. I'll move your chest, it's so disgusting. Don't rub your oily face on me. My lord, save me, I was really wrong. Even if I closed my eyes early due to the blinding scene, the naughty children's screams were still delightful. Wrong? Play with your new friends for a few hours first. Bring them away. Little Tim Ladd, I'm sorry. This is His Highness' orders. But don't worry, the team leader has already approved her application to join the Gentleman Alliance. From now on, we'll all be brothers. When he and a few other core members come down from the flagpole, we'll hold an induction ceremony for you. Everyone likes your designs, and from now on, your designs can be directly used by our team. You don't have to worry about not having enough research funds. Wait, when did I apply to join that pervert alliance? Don't touch me. I've done so much for the Mist Kingdom. I've bled for Your Highness. You can't do this. You can't do this. Your Highness, I beg of you, please hang me up on the flagpole as well. Hearing his application to hang himself up on the flagpole, I could understand his remorse. This way, Tim Ladd should have learned his lesson and would reconsider his actions in the future. Thus, I made my decision. No way. A naughty child's promise? Even if I said it to the best of my heart, with the forgetful nature of naughty children, I'm sure that he would forget it in 2 days. If he didn't learn his lesson this time, he would probably make the same mistake again. I'll let him remember it for the rest of his life. Sister, Princess, Your Highness, save me. Idiot, don't touch my butt. My first kiss, I was going to save it for sister. All right, that scream was really delightful. Hearing this naughty child scream, I finally regained my senses. Right, add something to those fellows on the flagpole. Let the magic cannoneers use them for target practice. Don't let them be idle. Don't worry, they won't die from practice bullets. Do you think that I don't know? These fellows have already gained experience from hanging upside down. How to sleep while hanging upside down in the most effortless position. Let's see how you sleep while being targeted. After dealing with these messy matters, it was time for me to focus on the serious matter at hand. My undead scouts and Aurora Aerial Knights were probably the highest-ranked scouts on the battlefield. Thanks to their hard work, I now had a certain level of control over the battlefield. I didn't know what the Allied armies were up to, but judging from how they didn't invite me to attend several military meetings, it was likely that they had many ulterior motives. Of course, I had my own plans as well, and the information I shared with them was carefully selected. The beastmen and elves had put aside their many years of grudges and worked together sincerely. Meanwhile, the humans were of the same species, but they kept scheming against each other. No matter how I looked at it, the situation on our side was far from good. However, ever since the elves entered the borders, I wasn't worried about Antoon anymore. This wasn't a military problem, but a political one. If my guess was correct, The elves were using the excuse of revenge in hopes that the war would continuously escalate until the mega-human empires and churches would be dragged into it. In that case, since they had already declared war on Slúir, if Antún fell and Slúir was destroyed, shouldn't they consider returning home? Perhaps this was the reason why the beastmen were attacking the cities at different speeds. Slúir's Antún was a trap to catch a big fish. If the bait died before it even started, then the beastmen would really have to think twice about how they were going to continue. With the current situation, if the beastmen lost the final battle, it would be enough to kill off half of the 7 Northlands countries. However, if any mega-human empires intervened, such as San Antonio, which the beastmen had a close relationship with, the few small elven countries in the Northlands would definitely be no match for them. Eliza, do you know anything about the inside story? Is there any news? No, this isn't the area we're responsible for. However, I can smell the stench of the devils. This mess is most likely the work of the devils. They love such useless schemes. If it was a demon lord, he would definitely start a blood sacrifice to summon a demon army. As long as the demon army arrives, we'll just crush them all. These useless little tricks are too laughable. Indeed, this was in line with my understanding of the chaos and chaos species. The devils always love to hide amongst other species to start a war or scheme, while the demons were much more direct. No, I have to go take a look. When a situation was unclear, it wasn't my style to sit at home and blindly give orders. That was why I unhesitatingly rode on Frigid Maw's steed and headed to the front lines to take a look. The flying Frigid Maw suddenly transformed into a mirage and missed the Thunder Eagle's lightning. Meanwhile, I summoned my war angel form in the mist and silently flew into the clouds. Let's go down. The next instant, when the Thunder Eagle Knight's attention was attracted by Irene Bela, who had reappeared, a gigantic sword directly shot them down from above. With Irene Bela's speed, Antún wasn't too far away. However, the air cavalry intercepting us on the way was quite troublesome. I had already met 4 squads of air cavalry along the way. Although the Thunder Eagles only had one natural ability, explosive lightning, which wasn't too difficult to deal with, their high speed and outstanding eyesight made them our greatest enemy. We might not be able to escape, so we could only face them head-on. At this point, even my transformation and Irene Bela's ability to turn invisible, which she could only use 3 times per day, had been forced to use. It seemed that we had reached our limits. Not far away, Antún was already under attack from all sides. However, I didn't take another step forward because the alarm bells in the beastmen's camp started ringing. Countless air cavalry began to rise into the sky. Ignoring the traditional troops such as wyverns, thunder eagles, and harpies, I even discovered a young green dragon knight. They're completely blocking the air route to Antún. Irene Bela, let's go back. When I gave the order to go back, the black cat hiding in my clothes jumped out of its own accord. Don't be in such a hurry. Circle around a bit more. Do you see those stone pillars below? Get closer and take a look. There might be more trouble. All right then. A single word from an expert caused the staff to break their legs. After I flew 2 circles around the stone pillars and played hide-and-seek with the little green dragon for 10 minutes, Heloise finally nodded and spoke. It's been confirmed. Let's go back. Since they're acting like this, it's likely that the final battle is about to begin. What's that? As I casually dodged the dragon's breath attack from behind, I leisurely gave the dragon knight the middle finger. This dragon didn't even have a full beard. At the very most, it wasn't even 100 years old. Perhaps it was even a livestock raised by the beastmen. Perhaps its strength was decent, but it definitely didn't have enough battle experience. When Irene Bela transformed into her bird form and accelerated at full speed, the green dragon was left behind in just a few minutes. After we got rid of the beastmen's air cavalry, I could finally ask Heloise what she had discovered. How would you muscleheads understand the secrets of mages? Don't shake, I'm falling. All right, I'll be direct. Those earth elementals are currently building a city. You should have heard of the elemental fortress, right? Perhaps in a few days, a huge city will be built here. When that time comes, you'll be attacking the big city while they attack the small city. That'll be fun. However, I shook my head in disbelief. Don't try to fool me. The elemental fortress can only be summoned in the elemental plane. This is the mortal plane. Yep, that's the second problem. The door to the earth elemental plane is currently opening. Very soon, you'll have to face countless stone men. Chapter 157. No matter how restless the world below was, it was always calm above the sea of clouds. In my eyes, the clouds slowly moved, combined, and changed according to their own rhythm. Just by looking at them, my heartbeat and thoughts slowed down, and my heart calmed down. However, the storm before me was obviously not in that state. Above the throne in the clouds, the raging whirlwind gathered into a pitch-black whirlpool of clouds. Thunder kept spilling out from within, and his voice was as loud and clear as thunder. That's right, this was him, not it. This was the powerful wind elemental god Cambion, the last of the 4 elemental gods, as well as the youngest one. Little thing, you're saying that stupid Big Rock actually intends to open a portal to the earth elemental plane in the mortal plane? That's impossible. Even he can't support such a huge consumption. And this is different from our original agreement. It seemed to be a question, but hearing this, I laughed. Agreement? Oh my, Lord Camberon, are you a newbie? You actually believe in a verbal agreement? Let me guess, your agreement is nothing more than fighting on your own, and the territory you conquer will belong to you. The storm continued to whirlpool, and the blurry face remained silent. However, this silence was enough to explain everything. From a certain standpoint, this rough agreement was the only one that could be accepted. Hee, talking about trust with demons and evil gods, only you could think of that. Do you think that if you were in this position and someone was willing to help you open a portal to the wind elemental plane, the wild gale plains, would you refuse? In your relationship with Omdaroken? Hee. Apart from a few special planes, the elements in a mortal plane must be kept in balance. Regarding the actual situation of the He continent, the great Saint Aristotle once proposed the theory of the 4 elements. In his eyes, all matter is composed of earth, water, air, and fire, and they correspond to the solid, liquid, gas, and plasma states of matter. At the same time, the 4 elements are the combination of dry, wet, cold, and warm. For example, dry and cold produce earth, and water is composed of wet and cold. Overall, balance must be maintained, and the elements can only compete for living space. This is the basic law of the world. From every point of view, the nature of the elements is different, but they are always aligned. The fire that represented high temperature and the ice that represented low temperature, the earth that represented solid state and the storm that represented free state. They competed with each other and reached a balance. This was determined by the basic nature of the elements. Do you think that after this world is connected to the earth elemental plane's rock-gathering cave, there's still a place for you, the wind elemental god, to interfere? Who knows? Maybe you and your race will be sealed in this world forever. There was still silence. However, judging from the thunderstorms that were surging around Camberon's gigantic body, the message that I wanted to convey had arrived. As an old rival of mine for many years, Camberon naturally knew that the moment the earth elemental plane was connected to the mortal plane, things wouldn't end well for him. This time, I am here representing the god of law to extend a friendship to a great existence like you. Why do you have to bow down to a junior? We can discuss many things in detail. Order faction? Haha. Do you think they are fundamentally different from those bastards from the Chaos faction? No. I only represent the god of law. Of course, there are also a few important figures that I can't reveal. I reached out my hand. Within the white crystal ball was a message that could only be received by the predetermined target. After the flashing ball of light finished transmitting the message, I crushed Camberon's hand. Do you think that you can make the great wind elemental god work for you with just your glib tongue? Get out. I don't want to see you right now. As Camberon's thunderous order for me to leave, I didn't say anything else and directly turned around to leave. However, there was a smile on my face. Based on my understanding of these old antiques, the fact that they didn't summon people to surround and attack me, and instead asked me to leave meant that they were moved and grateful. There were no complete secrets in this world. It was impossible for the news of my meeting with Camderin to be completely secret. Parting on bad terms was the best outcome. In my estimation, the fact that they didn't draw their swords meant that the negotiation was successful. If that bastard really refused, he should have crushed it without even looking at it. Earth Elemental God? Elemental Fortress? Haha, Amdarokin, I found you a good opponent. You can poach elves from the Order faction, but I can't poach wind elementals from the Chaos faction. In front of a country, war was an extension of politics. War was for benefits. Behind every seemingly sudden war, there were invisible arms and batons. At this point, I could more or less understand the Chaos faction's plans. From the perspective of the entire Holy War, the elemental invasion was just a prelude to the main course. Their core benefits were still to increase the intensity of the elemental tide in preparation for the main course. Perhaps it was apologetic to the beastmen and elves, but from a certain standpoint, their actions of war were just a form of loyalty. Or more importantly, it was a cover for the Chaos faction's true strategic goal. Linked to the elemental planes? What a joke. If the elemental tide caused by the 4 elemental gods was 1, then the complete link to an elemental plane would be at least 10. In that case, all of the Chaos faction's strategic plans could be brought forward. If the demons and evil gods begin to invade now, who can stop them? More importantly, this isn't a game. As long as you achieve your goal, those enemies won't come to give you experience one by one. There's an 80% chance that they'll come together. It's impossible to open the elemental gate. Increasing the elemental tide was a gradual process. Countless elemental creatures were killed in the mortal plane and returned to their own elemental planes. The remaining elements would spread throughout the world, increasing the elemental tide. Even without mentioning the influence of the elemental fortress and the large number of earth elemental reinforcements on the battlefield, I didn't want to see the elemental gate truly open no matter what. But if I wanted to stop it, I met with a small problem. I couldn't win. Yes, I couldn't win. I had no chance of winning at all. The Earth Elemental God would definitely act personally to open the Earth Elemental plane. If I tried to stop him from opening the Elemental gate, he would definitely fight me to the death. Although Amdarokin wasn't a high-profile Elemental God and didn't have any famous deeds, just the fact that he had a bad relationship with the other 3 Elemental gods and was still able to survive until now was enough to show how powerful he was. It was said that as the oldest existence among the 4 elemental gods, if an elemental god died, a new elemental lord would advance to become an elemental god. He was publicly recognized as the strongest elemental god. His strength probably wouldn't be inferior to any other god. Semi-gods could still be killed by overwhelming numbers, but against such an existence, unless a true god acted, it would be a waste no matter how many people came. Thus, I thought of looking for help. I didn't need to consider the true gods from the Order faction, but wasn't the one who was hunting with the black-winged people, right now Amdarokin's mortal enemy. Camderin? He was an enemy? Indeed, so what? The elves and the elven gods were still humans' allies. Every holy war was a reshuffling of power across the entire continent. Changing factions and betrayals were all too common. Thus, when I found out that Camderin and the winged people weren't too far from the Northlands, I didn't hesitate and personally came over. Even though it was not far, it would still take me at least half a month to get there. Completing the Earth Elemental Gate isn't something that can be done in a short period of time. Before that, the Chaos faction definitely doesn't want to see an early decisive battle. On the other hand, Antoon should be safe. I still had to deal with Camderin. These old antiques were especially particular about face and extravagance. It was already good enough for them to sweep those who didn't have enough weight out of the door. It was more normal for them to kill them along the way. Especially when it came to such an important matter, sincerity was even more important. Now that I had received the expected reply, I could finally be at ease. Stepping into the long-awaited Vulture assault airship, I began my journey back home. Even though I was in a temporary facility, the information from the front lines still hadn't been cut off. The pilot began to make preparations. The battlefield is still strangely calm. The elves seem to be reorganizing their army. The main armies of the 4 countries are being mobilized, and the total number of troops has already exceeded 150,000. Considering that the adult elves are at least silver rank in terms of combat strength, this is an extremely terrifying force. Out of the 3 walls of Antoon, only the innermost one is left. However, the siege has already stopped. San Antonio's army has already arrived in the northern lands and has officially taken over the defense of Red Maple City. If we were to return now, I'm afraid that we would meet with some small problems. The human allied army has already clashed with the beastmen. Both sides have victories and defeats. Just as you expected, the other 3 beastmen have already begun to gather together. This was a cage from the very start. Damn it, they actually dared to deceive the Demon Lord. Also, just as you expected, the second snowstorm has arrived. The heavy snow has sealed off the mountains, and right now, the various armies are all stuck in the cities. The resources that are being consumed every day are astronomical. Only high-level combatants are barely able to move about in this kind of hellish weather. You don't have to worry about missing the show of the year. Eliza's report carried a hint of resentment. It seemed that while she was teasing those Beastman chieftains, the Beastman chieftains didn't tell her the real battle plan, which made her very unhappy. And those messy, miscellaneous matters, for example, those bastard from the Gentleman Alliance. Even when you weren't around, they came to look for me. My departure and temporary appointment caused many miscellaneous matters to fall onto her shoulders. However, from a certain perspective, if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have left with peace of mind. Cough, don't I have something important to discuss? Right, how's the situation on our side? Our firearms business is selling like hotcakes. The uncharged magic sword has received unanimous praise after testing it. The orders for the magic explosion grenades can be queued up until the year after next. We won't be able to finish them even by next year. The profit from every transaction is at least 4 times the cost. We're making a killing. How's the training? The combat training for small squadrons is going smoothly, but there aren't many opportunities for military drills. Recently, there have been a lot of duels between high-level aerial mounts, but obviously, those aren't things that those brats can interfere in. Your Bone Dragon Knight, Timur, recently beat up that Green Dragon Knight and Storm Dragon Knight, making a name for himself. He's already vaguely known as the #1 aerial mount of the Northern Lands. What about those little toys? The first batch of war machines has already arrived. We just came to an agreement with that black-faced fellow 2 days ago. The first batch of 3 types and 7 machines are specially used to deal with the Beastman's behemoth. The profit this time is at least 400,000 gold coins. As expected, there is nothing more valuable than selling firearms on the battlefield. Eliza paused for a moment, but her words carried a hint of hesitation. Isn't waiting for the war to escalate going against our original intentions? Hearing this, I could only smile bitterly. Of course, I didn't want the war to escalate, but this was a trap set up by the Chaos faction. Without the ability to break out of this trap, what else could I do? Stretch out my hand and crush Onderoken to death? I think that I would be the one to die. I also want to stop the war immediately, but peace is something that can't be said. Only after enough blood has been shed will one truly look forward to peace and understand the value of peace. I can only hope that after this war, the northern lands will calm down for a few years, giving us enough time. Right, since there's nothing going on at home for the time being, I'm afraid that I will have to take a detour. You want to mediate the war? You want both sides to obediently return to the negotiation table? Other than a neutral stance, the most important thing is to have the strength to make both sides look at us. At the moment, I don't have either of these conditions, so I don't even know how to stop them. A long journey? Is there something more important? In 3 days' time, it will be the Winter Veil Festival. That is also the day when the Mist Country's Knight is appointed. Returning to Donglan to celebrate the festival? You can't be that free, right? Of course it is a festival, but it isn't with humans. The day when the knight is appointed refers to a type of knight unique to the Mist Country. You should understand now. You're talking about Aurora Night? The Winter Veil Festival is also the day that we promised with Frigid Maw. If we miss it, We will have to wait for next year. Aren't we lacking in strength now? If I bring them back, we might have enough. Every year, the Winter Veil Festival is the day when the Mist royalty and Frigid Maw agreed on the opening of the altar. Only on that day can the royalty retrieve the newborn Frigid Maw. If we were to go a year later, the formation of the Aurora Knight Squadron would be delayed by a year. Since the frontline battle has been obstructed by the expected snowstorm, it is normal for us to take a detour to do our proper business. All right, if there's nothing else, let's chat later. The latest news, the leader of the Kingdom of the Elves' army is King Adrian of the Tassel Kingdom. He is the target that you wanted me to pay attention to. I understand. I sighed. As expected, I knew that the ambitious Adrian wouldn't let go of such a good opportunity. Can you tell me about your relationship with him? Eliza's question made me reminisce about that sunny and carefree elf. Probably. It's about the same as the relationship between you and me. Ah, as expected, you really do like men. Who turned you gay? Adam or Kolos? I'm going to chop him up right now. I was instantly rendered speechless. What, as expected? This is already that and that. Could it be that Eliza always thought that I was gay? Don't get the wrong idea. I'm not interested in men. I'm talking about the relationship between master and disciple, and the relationship where you chop me up in the end. Sigh. My line of master and disciple seems to be all like this. Heloise, are you really cursed? Why do you always end up like this? How would I know? I only know that you chopped me up, and twice at that. All right then, master and disciple who share the same fate. We looked at each other with tears in our eyes and trembled in agitation. It seems that we are all people with bitter fates. Die. Unfilial disciple. I don't have a disciple like you. All right then, judging from how the bird was biting me, I probably misunderstood. The silly cat was just remembering the past and going crazy from anger. I casually grabbed the silly cat's neck, shook her twice, spun her around 3 times, and then sent her into the wastepaper basket that I had specially prepared for her. Cough. It seems that this really is a tradition. Eliza, remember to test your character first when you take on a disciple in the future. Relax, master. I have no intention of taking on a disciple. With the two of you acting as an example, what's the point of teaching a naughty child who needs so much effort to raise and will likely kill his or her master when he or she grows up? For some reason, hearing this comment, I felt a mysterious sense of sorrow. Was it that I had brought this upon myself? Yep, let's end this topic here. Eliza, be careful of Adrian. From a certain standpoint, he's your senior brother, and he's definitely not easy to deal with. Chapter 158. The snow is getting heavier. Looks like the supply team will be late again. Eliza looked at the heavy snow outside the window and could only shake her head helplessly. This was not the first time he had been delayed by the weather. At the beginning, he was burning with anxiety. After that, he was still helpless when he tried to contact his surroundings. Now, he was helpless and numb to the expected weather. It could be considered a helpless habit. After all, it wasn't just one side facing this terrible weather. Since both sides had stopped, there was nothing to be nervous about. It had to be said that the beastmen chose a very delicate time to attack. The heavy snow made the war fall into a rather awkward situation. Fight the final battle? How could they fight while skating and shivering in the cold? Even the preparation and distribution of winter supplies was a major task. Even the strongest army had to learn to be respectful in front of the power of nature. Damn it, it would have been better if it had been half a month earlier. Maybe we should have waited until next spring. Every beastman would probably think so when they were shivering in the cold. In the past, they would have been sleeping around the bonfire in their winter quarters. This was like procrastination. Everything went according to plan, but as they prepared, many factors affected them, and they ended up at the most inopportune time. What? Traffic jam? No problem. There's still 2 hours. Wrong way. No problem. There's still an hour. Airport highway repair? No problem, probably. Yup, there's still half an hour. We won't be late. Hee, we're finally here. I told you it was fine. What? Airport inspection? At least half an hour? Hey, stop joking. Don't leave the plane. Yup, that was more or less how it felt. It was just an analogy, definitely not someone's personal experience. Cough, to be honest, this was undoubtedly a scheme of someone and a certain demon lord. According to the Beastmen's original strategy, they wouldn't have encountered such trouble. But now, Eliza didn't feel happy about her scheme succeeding. After all, as time went by, the war was getting more and more intense, and the burden on her body was a little too heavy. Yes, she had lied. How could everything be fine during a war? The Beastmen and elves weren't easy to deal with. Although the general situation was as she had described, the actual pressure was much greater. The Allied army suffered a lot of casualties every day. However, this was the only way that Roland could be at ease and do his job. I'll look after the house. It'll be fine. Didn't Roland teach me everything? At the very least, even that silly girl and can become the underground overlord. How can I not be able to take charge? In a sense, Eliza always had an inexplicable sense of competition for Anne, even though her absolute strength now far surpassed, and she still hoped to prove to that person that she was the best leader. But obviously, there were some things that couldn't be taught. The current chaotic battlefield situation was much more difficult to deal with in the underground, where most of the enemy forces have been wiped out. The Beastman's aerial knight has come to challenge us again. This time it's 2 Thunderhawk teams and that Dragon Knight. San Antonio wants Sir Timier to fight, but Sir Timier obviously hasn't recovered from his previous injury. San Antonio's own aerial knight? Don't they have the Griffin Knight Regiment? They even have a legendary Griffin Knight holding the line. Why don't they go up themselves? They said that Elson is sick. Their words are very harsh. They want us to prove our worth with our military achievements. Hearing this, Eliza just pushed her glasses expressionlessly. However, no one knew what she was thinking in her heart. A legendary Griffin Knight can be sick? I should have killed those bastards long ago. Flashing Red Knight Elson? All right, I'll remember you. I'll wait patiently for the day you enter the sticks. Maybe I'll personally send you down. In a sense, even in the human world, the super empire was a synonym for tyranny. In their eyes, being willing to support the 7 northern countries was already a great gift. How could a super empire accept the command of a small country? Naturally, the command of the Allied forces would be handed over to him. And under the premise that the leading Kisomi Duchy was only a vassal of San Antonio, from the moment the reinforcements arrived, the command of the Allied forces was handed over to these proud San Antonians. At this time, it was obvious that the San Antonians were very dissatisfied with Donglon, who was profiting from the war, especially when they sent out the least reinforcements among the 6 northern countries. But the Donglon Aerial Knight was the lowest gold ranked. Even San Antonio had to take them seriously. Therefore, in the name of the commander of the Allied forces, they requested for Donglon's aerial cavalry to fight. In the beginning, Donglon's Aurora Knight and Bone Dragon Knight did win consecutive duels. Even Donglon, who had been weak for many years, became famous at the same time. But the orcs no longer had the intention to duel. If they were to compare numbers, Donglon's new generation of aerial knight had not matured yet. The undead aerial cavalry was too few, and they had to carry out other missions. Even Timier was injured by the enemy's continuous attacks. What about the other Aurora Knight? Is there anyone who can fight? Even during the Mist Kingdom's peak, the weakest Aurora Knight that was above gold ranked did not exceed 100. At this point in time, due to certain reasons, out of the 50-plus Aurora Knight in the Undead Knight Regiment, only 15 were in the north. Most of them were not in Red Maple City. 2 of the Aurora Knight's injuries have not healed yet. There are still 3 in good condition. The rest are carrying out scouting missions. Her Highness Renee applied for battle, but she was reprimanded by Lord Timier. Obviously, even if the 3 Aurora Knight were all legendary ranked, it was not enough to deal with 2 squadrons of almost 100 aerial cavalry. Although the Aurora Knight was good enough to deal with aerial battles, the sky was not their best battlefield. Hearing that, Eliza fell into silence. She was hesitating if she should remove the seal and crush the Dragon Knight to death. After that, she would step on those arrogant San Antonians. But what would happen next would definitely be the collapse of her clone and the return of her consciousness to the abyss. If Roland was here, from a certain point of view, This was the first time Eliza was shouldering the heavy burden of a country alone. It was no wonder that she was hesitating. Even if she knew that this assumption was meaningless, she still instinctively considered this possibility. Lady Eliza, in fact, His Highness Roland had left a letter. After hesitating for a long time, the servant finally spoke. It seemed that the current situation had reached the predicament that he had expected. He could have contacted him directly, but he actually left a letter? Eliza was stunned for a moment. Then, she could only shake her head unwillingly. This fellow saw through me again? Yes, Roland knew Eliza's character from start. So before he left, he naturally made preparations. And in order to take care of her pride, he obviously would not take it out unless it was such a crucial moment. Since you have seen this letter, then the situation is probably not good. Let me guess, the thing that troubled you, but did not tell me, is most likely the internal troubles of the Allied army. There are too many external factors in this war. The position of both sides is not stable. It is not surprising that someone will betray someone. Maintaining strength is the priority. As for the other countries, it does not matter if they offend all of them. As long as they cross the line, even if they are allies, there is no doubt that they will be looking for a beating. Just treat it as if you are in the abyss and learn how the old devils treat their allies. You're more familiar with their style of doing things than I am. Roland seemed unreliable, but in fact, he was extremely scheming. He trusted everyone, but he did not trust anyone deeply. From the beginning, he had made all kinds of plans and backups. In Roland's eyes, even if San Antonio did not come, it would be difficult for the sparsely populated Donlon to obtain the commanding authority of the Allied army. And once they lost the commanding authority, it would be difficult for them to even speak in the command center. This had nothing to do with one's ability and willpower. In this temporary Allied army, it was an iron law that whoever had the bigger fist would have the final say. And once the commander-in-chief fell into the hands of another country, one would definitely be used as cannon fodder. This wasn't because Roland thought too badly of others. Instead, it was because he judged others by his own standards. He firmly believed that if he had the commanding authority, he would definitely use the soldiers of other countries as cannon fodder and preserve his own main force. And the facts proved his conjecture. But since there were not many people on the surface, the Mist Kingdom actually suffered the least losses these days. The ones who suffered the most were the Kingdom of Rhodes and the Empire of Enzolo. During the intermittent skirmishes, their infantry regiment and knight regiment were dragged to the rear and the front line many times. At this time, the casualties were more than 30%, and there were many complaints. This was also the derivation of political factors on the battlefield. These two countries were the 4 southern countries of the 7 northern countries, the 4 countries leaning toward the south. Among the 4 southern countries, Sluir was on the brink of destruction, and Kasomi was his vassal state. On the other hand, the 3 northern countries did not listen to his commands. It was obvious who should be used as cannon fodder. The unluckiest was the Kingdom of Rhodes. They were politically leaning towards the north, but because the members of the royal family were all southern nobles, they were in the stranglehold of the southern country, San Antonio. As for the other 2 countries of the 3 northern countries other than Donlon, the Kingdom of Sua, a highland country with barbarian blood, and the Kingdom of Phoenix, which was as old as the Mist Kingdom, completely ignored the blind command of the people of San Antonio. Of course, this kind of thing could not be said directly. But putting aside those appearances and cover-ups, directly looking at the results, direct dealings between countries were often bloody and direct. In reality, with Elise's ability, she wouldn't be able to see through these twists and turns. It was just that the responsibility of replacing Roland was too heavy, and she had too many misgivings, so she couldn't make the decision to turn against Roland. Now that there was Roland's personal letter, she naturally wouldn't hesitate anymore. Let's say that our air knight is also sick. He caught a cold and has a fever of 40 degrees. How can he fight in the sky? What? Undead don't have fever? Then let's say that he has diarrhea. Yes, I'm clearly playing them, not giving them any face. If they're not happy, then first ask them how Elson got sick. If it still doesn't make sense, then let Timir meet that Griffin Knight and see if he has recovered from his illness. And when Eliza made up her mind not to compromise and directly gave the other party attitude, she also felt a little more relaxed. And just when she was about to pour herself a cup of black tea to rest and then deal with those annoying official matters, a reckless figure barged in. Not good. The latest news. The Anzolo Empire suddenly changed sides and attacked our camp. Our army was defeated. The 7 northern countries suddenly became the 6 northern countries. No matter how good Eliza's self-cultivation was, she still spat out the black tea in her mouth. At this time, she finally understood what Roland meant. Every holy war is the time when countries and major forces stand on the same side. The position of both sides is not stable, and it is not surprising who betrays. We should also preserve our strength first. In the Aurora's hangar, dozens of engineers were busy, and the team of teenagers, Cohen and Timlad, had mysteriously become the leaders of the research team. Why does His Highness still not allow us to use it on the battlefield? If it can be used in theory, our situation should be much better, and we can also teach those northerners a lesson. The wisdom of mortals. Ever since he came into contact with His Highness Roland, Timlad fell in love with those pretentious lines. Now, as long as someone asked him what he did not understand, he would definitely push down his glasses flat and then talk about stupid humans, the wisdom of mortals. Even monkeys are smarter than you. Whether or not he showed that he was very knowledgeable, it was true that he made people want to beat him up. Many people in the Gentleman League had already beaten him up, but apparently little Timlad had forgotten. Is there any hidden meaning in these words? We are not gods. Of course we are mortals. You still haven't told me why not use it on the battlefield. All right, in front of Cohen, who had a serious face, in front of him, and in front of him, even the usually lively Timlad had to restrain himself. My stupid little brother. It seemed that in a certain sense, his restraint was limited. I'm older than you. Also, I'm not related to you by blood. Cohen was obviously stubborn, and this was his personality. After receiving orders from Roland, he made Timlad work overtime every day. Finally, Timlad could not take it anymore. You blockhead. You have no sense of humor or the sales of an artist. Are you really a mage? You're just like those muscular knight guys. I'm not a mage to begin with. Do I really look like a knight? That's great. Hee hee, I'm not as good as you say. All right. Next up was a time for little Timlad to go on a rampage. But even if he had 2 arms, he would definitely not be able to defeat Cohen. From a certain perspective, the young but stubbornly old-fashioned Cohen was basically Timlad's natural enemy. All right, I'll tell you the truth. His Highness means that the guys down there are not reliable at all. These are all our backup plans, and we can't use them until the critical moment. What's the critical moment? That's a lot. But we won't use them until the critical moment. And as long as the higher-ups deem it necessary to use them, the green light above the hangar will turn red. Green light? I didn't see it. Am I really colorblind? Isn't it above us that red light is... Wait, it's red. The battle has begun. Showa Swamp, Kadio Wastelands, Baikal Highlands were once forbidden areas for the living, and also the territory of the Shil Empire. But now, it had turned into a battlefield. Countless undead were slaughtering each other, and the battlefield was filled with the roars of a formless black death god. The ground was filled with the smell of bones and rotting flesh. The undead of both sides were using actual combat to exchange their understanding of the art of death. The civil war in Shiloah had already lasted for several months. At this point, both sides had suffered heavy losses, and it was time for the war to end. And at this critical moment, more than 30 Air Knight suddenly arrived. They were draped in black cloaks, and their figures couldn't be seen clearly. But judging from the transparent white shadow mounts and the frightening power of death overflowing around them, it was obvious that they were extremely high-ranked Death Knight. And the moment they landed, a figure was already waiting for them. You're finally here. It's been a tough journey, but it's a pity that we don't have time to rest. Is there a need for us to rest? Little Lionheart, we're here according to His Highness's instructions. Our plan can begin. Of course, it wouldn't be wrong to say that it's ending. The once great city of Antoon had already suffered the greatest calamity in its history. Not only did it lose a large portion of its walls, but its master had also lost the hearts of the people. In the long siege war, countless citizens and soldiers had sacrificed themselves without any complaints. But when the war caused a shortage of resources, not only did the royal family not open the treasury to distribute food, but they even started to collect food from the citizens. This had already caused public outrage. Ever since the start of the war, King Fumilcasso had never appeared. In addition to that, before the beastmen invaded, it was said that Prince Roland had given a warning. Not only did Fumil not listen, he even slandered Roland for having ulterior motives. Now, the facts had proven this king's foolishness. His behavior of cowering in his own palace had also proven his cowardice. Coupled with his selfishness in collecting food, this king's reputation had become unbearable. In this dangerous world, the citizens had the duty to provide for the Lord, but the Lord also had the duty to protect the citizens. This was the most basic relationship of trust between the two. And when the Lord wasn't willing to fulfill his most basic duty, how could he sit on his throne? Fumil isn't fit to be the king. There were already people shouting this slogan in the streets and alleys. And at this moment, the king had just executed a concubine who tried to persuade him to go up to the city walls to fight. He was shivering in his own palace. All of you want me to die. All of you want me to die. All of you are assassins sent by that Roland. All of you want to steal my throne. I won't let you get what you want. I must survive. At the same time, in a house in Antoun, two temporary stowaways were at a loss as to what to do. Marguerite, I want to kill this bastard. Must we protect him? If you're unhappy, then go ahead and mess with him. But don't kill him. Otherwise, this city will be finished. Protect Antoun. That fellow Roland really knows how to randomly assign tasks. Don't worry, he'll soon get his retribution. My instincts have always been accurate. Is it the commonly known as the Shura blade? Shura field. It's a strange term that Roland invented, but it always ends up being used on him. But this time, it probably won't happen. In front of Eliza, I feel that Rene isn't competitive at all. Your instincts must have guessed wrongly. Some of it isn't my instincts. The red-haired warrior shook the crumpled letter. It was a greeting from his hometown, and a certain someone was coming to visit. You didn't tell Roland? Are you planning to trick him again? I really forgot this time. It definitely wasn't on purpose. If you forget every time, then it must be on purpose. Very few people knew that the most secretive passage to the underground world in the north was actually in the Elven Kingdom. And at this moment, an adventuring party formed by two young girls was wandering in it. Anya, are you sure this is the right path? Why do I feel like we're going the wrong way again? Sister Anne, please believe me. I'm absolutely right. I swear in the name of my grandfather that my horseshoe is guiding me. This is the path in front of me. You said the same thing half a month ago. Why don't we find someone to ask? Can we find someone to ask? Hey, Sister Banshee over there, may I ask if the Elven territory is this way? You're my little apple. No matter how much I love you, it's never too much. Your little red face warms my heart and lights up the fire of my life. Fire, 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 fire. When there were so many things waiting for me to deal with, I was in the middle of the snowy mountain, beating the drums and singing. The reason? It was probably because of the people around me who were singing along. Fire, 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 fire. What is fire? Can it be eaten? Of course it can be eaten. Didn't you see that human crying while singing? He must be craving it. All right, I want to try it too. There are only snow dregs in the snowy mountain. The ones speaking were snowmen, snow monsters, and snow ladies. On the day of the Winter Veil Festival, they organized a grand entertainment event. When they heard that I was the descendant of the legendary singer from 1,000 years ago, the Mist King, I was told that if I didn't perform well, I wouldn't be able to take away a single frigid maw. Yes, the legendary singer, the Mist King, relied on this to settle these frigid maw. At this moment, I wasn't crying because I was craving it. Humans don't have this ability. I was obviously going crazy from anxiety. One more. You sang so well, little apple. Great. Little apple must be the lover that you miss. Yeah, there are many cubs in the altar. You can take as many as you can sing. I finally understood why the Mist King never told anyone what he had encountered in the past. Even if the truth of history was always deceptive, to this extent, he was probably the only one. If it was me in the past, I definitely wouldn't say anything either. Wiping away my tears, the audience was so supportive, I could only continue. My musical talent was extremely limited. Most of the songs that I could remember were divine songs that were filled with demonic music, betraying my love, forcing me to leave. When I finally found out the truth, my tears fell. 100 years later, there was a legend that when a mountain dweller got lost in the snowy mountains during the Wintervale festival, if he came back, he would become an idiot and then madly sing a demonic song that would drive people crazy. And those who heard this song would also become an idiot and only know how to sing along. The boundless horizon is my love. Flowers are blooming at the foot of the rolling green mountains.